I hired a babysitter, and she saved my child's life. I never thought much about babysitters. To me, they were just teenagers looking for extra cash, someone to watch my 6-year-old son, Liam, for a few hours while I worked late shifts. That was until I met Emily. Emily was different. She wasn't a teenager. She was in her early 20s, responsible, and had a calm, almost intuitive way with kids. Liam took to her immediately. I hired her on the spot, relieved to have found someone reliable. That Friday night, I left Emily in charge while I attended an important business dinner. Everything seemed fine when I left. Liam was watching his favorite dinosaur cartoon, and Emily was sitting nearby, flipping through a book. I had no idea that within the hour she would be fighting to save my child's life. Around 8:30 p.m., Emily decided it was time for Liam to brush his teeth and get ready for bed. He ran to the bathroom like always, laughing and playing along the way. But just as Emily stood to follow him, she heard a loud thud. Her heart stopped. "Liam?" she called, rushing toward the bathroom. No answer. Then she heard a strange gurgling sound. Panic surged through her as she pushed the door open. Liam was lying on the floor, convulsing, his little face turning pale. His lips were blue. He was choking. Emily acted fast. Dropping to her knees, she turned him over and pounded his back. Nothing. He was still struggling. She realized it must have been something small, something he swallowed. Maybe toothpaste? A toy? She didn't know, but she couldn't waste another second. Lifting him onto her lap, she positioned her hands and performed the Heimlich maneuver, just as she had learned in her babysitting safety course. 1, 2, 3. Nothing. Liam's body was going limp. Tears blurred Emily's vision, but she refused to give up. She tried again, pressing harder this time. And then, a small plastic cap shot out of his mouth, clattering onto the floor. Liam gasped for air. His tiny chest rose and fell in deep, shuddering breaths. Color returned to his cheeks. He was crying. Thank God he was crying. Emily cradled him against her, shaking as much as he was. But he was alive. When I came home an hour later, I found Emily on the couch, still holding Liam, who was drowsy but safe. When she told me what had happened, I dropped to my knees and hugged them both. I didn't even want to think about what could have happened if Emily hadn't been there, if she hadn't known what to do. That night, as I tucked Liam into bed, he held my hand tightly. "Emily saved me, Mommy," he whispered. I looked at Emily, my eyes filled with gratitude. "She's not just a babysitter," I said. "She's a hero." And from that moment on, I knew I could never trust just anyone with my child. Because sometimes the right babysitter isn't just someone who watches over your kid. Sometimes they save their life. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined what could have happened if Emily hadn't been there. If she had panicked. If she had frozen. If she hadn't known how to do the Heimlich maneuver. I kept checking on Liam, who was fast asleep, his little chest rising and falling peacefully. But my mind was racing. Around midnight, I walked into the living room where Emily was still sitting on the couch, staring at the floor. "Emily," I said softly. She looked up and I could see she had been crying. "I just keep thinking, what if I hadn't gotten it out in time?" she whispered. I sat down beside her and took her hand. "But you did," I said firmly. "You saved him, Emily. That's what matters." She nodded, but I could tell the weight of the night still sat heavy on her. "I don't know how to thank you," I continued. "I don't even have the words." "You don't have to," she said with a small smile. "I just did what anyone should do." But I knew better. Not everyone would have stayed so calm. Not everyone would have known what to do. And not everyone would have been there just in time. A few days later, after the shock had settled, I invited Emily over again. Not as a babysitter, but as a friend. Liam wouldn't stop talking about her, calling her his superhero. Over coffee, I asked her how she had stayed so calm that night. She hesitated, then sighed. It's not the first time I've been in that situation, she admitted. I frowned. What do you mean? She stared at her mug, running a finger along the rim. When I was little, my younger brother choked on a piece of hard candy, she said quietly. I was only 9. I didn't know what to do. And by the time my mom got to him, it was too late. A chill ran down my spine. I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to save someone, I would, she said. So when I started babysitting, I took every first aid course I could. I never wanted to feel helpless again. Tears welled in my eyes. Emily wasn't just a hero. She was someone who had turned her own pain into a purpose. I reached over and squeezed her hand. Your brother would be so proud of you. She smiled, though her eyes were glassy with emotion. I hope so. After that night, Emily became more than just a babysitter. She became family. Liam adored her, and I trusted her more than anyone. Whenever I needed help, she was there. Not just as someone to watch Liam, but as a friend, a sister, and a guardian angel in disguise. One day, Liam came running into the kitchen, grinning from ear to ear. Mommy, I drew a picture. He held up a crayon drawing of a stick figure with a red cape. It's Emily, he announced proudly. She's my superhero. Emily laughed, ruffling his hair. I think you're my hero, buddy. I smiled, knowing that fate had brought Emily into our lives for a reason. She wasn't just a babysitter. She was a lifesaver. And for that, I would be forever grateful. Months passed, and Emily remained an important part of our lives. She babysat Liam regularly, but more than that, she became family. We had dinners together, went to the park as a trio, and celebrated birthdays and small victories. Liam adored her in a way I'd never seen before. He would draw pictures of them together, call her his bestest friend, and even ask if she could move in with us. But then, one evening, Emily came over with a hesitant look on her face. I need to talk to you, she said as I poured her a cup of tea. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Something about her tone made me uneasy. She took a deep breath. I got accepted into a paramedic training program. It starts next month. I blinked in surprise, then felt my chest swell with admiration. Emily, that's amazing, I exclaimed. You're going to be incredible at it. She smiled but glanced down at her hands. It means I'll have to cut back on babysitting, and eventually I'll have to leave. The words hit harder than I expected. It was selfish, I knew, but the thought of losing her presence in our lives stung. Liam, who had been playing with his dinosaur toys on the floor, suddenly looked up. You're leaving? His little voice was filled with confusion. Emily bit her lip. Not right away, buddy, but I have to go learn how to help more people, just like I helped you. Tears welled in Liam's eyes. But you're my superhero. Emily reached out and pulled him into a hug. I'll always be your superhero, she whispered, and you'll always be my favorite sidekick. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You're going to save so many lives, Emily, just like you saved Liam's. She nodded, her eyes glistening. I just hope I can make a difference. You already have, I said. More than you know. Over the next few weeks, we made the most of our time together. We threw Emily a surprise farewell party with a cake decorated like an ambulance. Liam made her a scrapbook filled with drawings and photos of their adventures. And then, the day came. We stood by her packed car, Liam clutching her hand tightly. Promise you'll come visit? He asked, his voice small. Emily crouched to his level and smiled. I pinky promise. He held out his tiny pinky and she hooked hers around his. And you have to send me pictures of your drawings, okay? He nodded vigorously. Then, she stood up and pulled me into a tight hug. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. No, thank you, I said, my voice shaking. For saving my son, for being part of our family. She wiped her eyes, then climbed into her car. As she drove away, Liam waved until she was out of sight. Life moved on, but Emily was never far from our thoughts. We video called her every week. Liam would show off his latest dinosaur drawings, and she'd tell us about her training, how she had saved someone from choking during her first aid practice. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Emily. It was a photo of her in her paramedic uniform, grinning from ear to ear. First official day as a paramedic. Can't wait to visit soon. Miss you guys. I showed Liam the picture, and he beamed. She's a real superhero now. I smiled, hugging him close. She always was. And deep down, I knew. Emily hadn't just saved Liam's life that night. She had found her purpose, and in doing so, she had changed all of our lives forever. A year passed since Emily left for her paramedic training, but she was never truly gone from our lives. She kept in touch, sending messages and photos from her shifts. Some heartbreaking, some inspiring. Every time Liam saw a speeding ambulance, he would point and say, "Maybe that's Emily." Then, one evening, something unexpected happened. It was a stormy night. Rain lashed against the windows and thunder rumbled in the distance. Liam and I were curled up on the couch watching a movie when my phone rang. It was Emily. But instead of her usual cheerful greeting, she spoke in a hurried, urgent voice. "I'm on my way to your neighborhood," she said. "There's been an accident nearby. A major one, multiple injuries. The roads are bad and emergency response is delayed." My heart pounded. "Wait, you're here? Right now?" "Yes. And I need a favor." "Of course. Anything." There was a brief pause before she spoke again. "We need a place to stabilize a patient while we wait for another ambulance. Can I bring them to your house?" I didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. I'll unlock the door now." I hung up, already moving. Liam looked up at me, sensing my urgency. "What's wrong, Mommy?" "Emily's coming," I said, grabbing towels and blankets. "She needs our help." His face lit up. "She's coming here?" "Yes, sweetheart, but she's bringing someone who's hurt, so I need you to be brave and stay out of the way, okay?" Liam nodded solemnly. Minutes later, headlights flashed through the storm. I ran to the door just as Emily and another paramedic helped a man inside. He was bleeding from his forehead, his arm bent awkwardly. "Car accident," Emily explained as they gently eased him onto my couch. "He's stable, but we need to keep him warm and monitor his breathing until transport arrives." I nodded, grabbing the supplies. As I handed Emily a towel to clean the man's wounds, I couldn't help but notice the way she worked. Confident, steady, and in control. She had changed. She wasn't just a babysitter anymore. She was a lifesaver. As they worked, Liam peeked around the corner, eyes wide with awe. He wasn't scared. He was proud. When the second ambulance finally arrived, Emily turned to me with a tired but grateful smile. "You just turned your living room into an emergency room," she joked. I exhaled, shaking my head. "I'll do anything for my hero." She laughed, but I meant every word. After the patient was safely transported, Emily stayed a little longer. We sipped tea in the kitchen, listening to the rain. "This feels full circle," I said. "A year ago, you saved Liam's life here. Now you're out saving the world." Emily smiled, stirring her tea. "You know, I think saving Liam saved me too." Liam suddenly ran into the kitchen, holding a drawing. "Look, Emily, it's you." She took the picture and gasped. It was a crayon drawing of an ambulance, with her in the driver's seat wearing a cape. Above it, in big letters, Liam had written, "Emily, superhero of the whole world." Emily's eyes shimmered. She pulled Liam into a hug, then looked at me. "I may be out there helping people," she said softly, "but you guys will always be home to me." And I knew, no matter where life took her, Emily would always be part of our family. This gives the story a powerful full circle moment, showing how Emily has grown while keeping her bond with Liam and his mother. Let me know if you'd like another continuation or any changes. A few months after Emily's last visit, life returned to a more predictable rhythm. Liam was thriving in school, and I was adjusting to the quiet after all the chaos with Emily's departure. I had continued with my work, and though I missed Emily's presence, I was incredibly proud of all she had achieved. One day, while I was tidying up the kitchen, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Emily. "Hey, just checking in. How's Liam doing? Can I ask a favor?" My heart skipped. It had been a while since I'd heard from her personally, and her request seemed a bit more urgent than usual. I quickly typed back, "Everything's good. Liam's excited to show you his new dinosaur drawings next time. What's up?" Her reply was almost immediate. "I need your help again. There's been a major emergency. The hospital's overwhelmed. Can I count on you?" A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. I didn't even hesitate. "Of course, what do you need?" A few moments later, the details came in. There had been a massive pileup on the highway near our town. Multiple victims. Emily was coordinating with the other paramedics, but there was more work than they could manage, and the hospital couldn't keep up with the incoming patients. Emily needed me to take in a patient, someone who had been stabilized but still required care until the hospital could manage them. The storm had worsened, and the roads were closed. I quickly glanced over at Liam, who was playing in the next room. My son, my heart. I called him over. "Sweetheart, Emily might need us again. There's someone who needs our help." He looked up, his eyes serious. "Are we going to save someone?" I smiled softly, touched by his bravery. "Yes, we are. Just like we did before. But this time, we need to be extra careful." Liam nodded with determination. I could see his little heart swelling with pride, just as mine was. Emily arrived a short time later, her paramedic uniform drenched in the rain. She wasn't alone. She was accompanied by a middle-aged woman who had been involved in the accident. She was conscious, but clearly in pain, her leg badly injured. Emily and the other paramedics had done their best to stabilize her, but she was still in need of urgent care. "This is Gina," Emily introduced her softly. "She's stable, but she'll need medical supplies until we can get her to the hospital." I nodded, helping Emily guide Gina into the living room, where I'd prepared a space for her. Liam quietly followed, offering his hand to Gina with a shy smile. "Are you okay?" Liam asked softly. Gina smiled weakly. "I will be, sweetheart. I just need to rest a little." Emily and I worked quickly, setting up an IV, checking her vitals, and making sure she was comfortable. The whole time, Liam hovered nearby, asking questions, keeping Gina company, and offering her his blanket when she shivered. I had never been so proud of my son. As I assisted Emily with the patient, I couldn't help but marvel at how far Emily had come. The calm confidence in her eyes, her ability to manage chaos, her deep care for the people she helped. It was like a new Emily, a hero in every sense of the word. "Do you ever get scared?" I asked quietly as we worked together. She looked up from her patient, her face softening. "I did, in the beginning. A lot. But when you've seen what can happen when you don't act fast enough, you don't get scared anymore. You just move. You just help." I could tell she was talking about more than just her job. She was talking about herself, the girl who had once been too afraid to save her brother, now becoming the person who saved countless others. By the time the second ambulance arrived to transport Gina to the hospital, the rain had slowed. Emily was exhausted, but she had a peaceful look on her face. "Thank you," she said, pulling me into a tight hug. "You don't know how much this means." "You saved her life," I replied, holding her close. "You are the hero." Emily stepped back, her eyes glistening. "I couldn't have done it without you. Without you believing in me, even when I wasn't sure of myself." I squeezed her hand. "We believe in you, Emily. Always have." Liam, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, suddenly ran over and hugged Emily's legs. "I knew you were going to save her," he said, his voice full of admiration. Emily bent down and ruffled his hair. "You were my biggest cheerleader, buddy. Thank you for being so brave." "Will you come back and visit?" Liam asked eagerly. "Of course," Emily promised, kissing him on the top of the head. "You'll always be my little sidekick." As Emily left, I stood by the door, feeling the weight of everything she had given us. She was no longer just a babysitter. She had become a force of nature, a woman who transformed the pain of her past into a mission of saving lives. And in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't just our hero anymore. She was the hero of the world. This continuation brings Emily's journey full circle, showing her strength as a paramedic and her lasting bond with Liam and his mother. Let me know if you'd like any further changes or additions. It had been a few months since Emily's latest visit, and life had settled into a familiar rhythm. But things weren't the same anymore. For one, Liam had started asking more questions about heroes. Not just the ones in his favorite cartoons or storybooks, but real heroes. The ones who put their lives on the line every day to help others. And more often than not, he was talking about Emily. I'd never been more proud of him. "Mom, do you think I could be a superhero like Emily?" he asked one evening as we were winding down for bed. My heart swelled. "I think you already are, sweetheart," I said, tucking him in. "A superhero doesn't have to wear a cape or have superpowers. A hero is someone who helps others, no matter what." Liam smiled, his eyes closing sleepily. "Like Emily, right?" "Exactly," I whispered, kissing his forehead. I didn't realize it then, but those words would stay with Liam for a long time. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected call. It was from Emily, and she sounded different. Tense, distracted. "Hey, is everything okay?" I asked, a pang of concern rising in my chest. "Hey, yeah, things are fine. Actually, no, it's not. I need your help again." Her voice faltered slightly, which was unlike her. "Anything, Emily. You know I've got your back." There was a brief pause before she spoke again, her voice steady but urgent. "I'm heading out on a major rescue mission tomorrow. It's a big one. Multiple casualties, potentially hazardous conditions. I've been asked to lead a team to a remote area. The thing is, they're short on personnel and they need someone experienced to back us up on site." I felt a surge of fear. "You want me to help?" "Yeah," she said quietly. "I know it's asking a lot, but I trust you. You've been through this with me before, and I need someone who can handle pressure. Someone who knows how to keep a level head. Would you do it?" I paused, my thoughts racing. I had always supported Emily, but this was bigger than anything I'd ever done before. "I'll do it," I said firmly, my voice resolute. "When do we leave?" The next morning, I met Emily and her team at the local emergency services headquarters. I had no idea what I was getting into. The operation was classified as a search and rescue mission, and the conditions were dire. A series of wildfires had cut off entire communities from access to medical care, and the number of injured civilians was rising. As we made our way to the site, I couldn't help but notice the look of determination on Emily's face. She was always calm under pressure, but today there was an edge to her, a quiet resolve that told me she was preparing for something major. As we hiked toward the affected area, I thought about Liam, about how he looked up to Emily as his superhero. I had always admired her, but today, I was seeing a side of her I'd never truly understood. The side that didn't just save lives, but was willing to risk everything for others. When we reached the perimeter, the chaos hit. There were injured people everywhere, their faces pale, their bodies covered in soot. Emily immediately took charge, coordinating her team with military precision. I helped as best as I could, assisting in stabilizing victims, handing over medical supplies, and comforting the injured. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced. There were moments when the pressure seemed insurmountable. But every time I looked to Emily, she was right there, leading the way, never wavering. It wasn't until we were near the edge of the perimeter, helping evacuate a family from a collapsed home, that I realized something. I wasn't just helping for the sake of others. I was doing this because Emily had shown me how. She had shown me what it meant to be strong, to rise to the occasion, to not flinch in the face of disaster. As I carried a child to safety, the ground beneath us shook violently, and a nearby structure crumbled. Emily's team immediately sprang into action, securing the area. "Move back," Emily shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Everyone clear the way." In that moment, I felt a surge of pride. This wasn't just Emily's mission. It was ours. We managed to evacuate everyone safely. It was a long, grueling process, and by the time the operation ended, the sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the horizon. We had saved dozens of lives, but there was no time to relax. Emily's team had already begun their debrief, preparing for the next step. I stood off to the side, reflecting on the day. I had seen the true meaning of heroism, the kind that didn't need recognition, that didn't need fame. It was the kind of heroism that came from the quiet strength of someone who put others first, no matter the cost. And I knew now that I wasn't just proud of Emily because she saved Liam that night. I was proud of her because she had taught me how to be brave, how to face fear, how to rise above when it mattered most. When I called Liam that evening, his voice was excited, but I could hear the concern in his words. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm okay, buddy," I said, smiling. And guess what? I was part of a rescue mission today, just like Emily. There was a long pause before Liam spoke again. "Did you save anyone?" I thought about the hundreds of lives we had touched today, the ones that had been saved, the ones we'd helped carry to safety. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "We saved a lot of people today, just like Emily would." As I closed my eyes, I realized something. I hadn't just learned how to help others from Emily. I had learned how to be a hero too. And that made me believe that no matter the journey ahead, we would always have the strength to face it. Together. This continuation focuses on how Emily's influence not only transforms her life, but inspires others, including the narrator, to rise to the occasion. It's a story of personal growth, heroism, and lasting connections. Let me know what you think or if you'd like more to explore. The rescue mission had come to a close, but the impact of that day lingered in my heart. I returned home, weary but content, knowing I had faced something bigger than myself and emerged stronger. What I hadn't realized was how deeply that experience would shape me, and how it would ripple out into my relationship with Liam and the community. As the weeks passed, Liam seemed different, more confident, more aware of the world around him. We'd always talked about heroes, but now he understood them on a deeper level. He'd often ask about Emily and her work, imagining her as some sort of mystical figure, larger than life. "Mom, do you think I could help people like Emily when I grow up?" he asked one afternoon, his voice filled with determination. I smiled, remembering my own doubts before this journey. "I know you will, sweetheart. You've got a big heart, just like Emily." But then, one day, something happened that made me realize just how far-reaching Emily's influence had gone. It was late afternoon, and I was picking Liam up from school when I received a call from the principal. My stomach dropped as I listened. "Mrs. Thompson, I wanted to inform you that there's been a minor incident at school. Nothing serious, but we thought you should know." "Is Liam okay?" I asked, panic rising. "Oh, yes, he's perfectly fine. It's just that..." Well, Liam's class had been learning about emergency preparedness today. The kids had been talking about what they'd do in an emergency. Apparently, your son was quite passionate about what he learned. A feeling of unease washed over me as I imagined what my little boy could have said. "What exactly did he do?" The principal chuckled lightly. Liam stood up in front of the whole class and gave a very thorough, very confident explanation of how to help someone in need. He talked about the importance of staying calm and acting fast, just like his superhero, Emily. My heart swelled with pride and surprise. I didn't know he'd been thinking about that so much. "Well, you'd be proud," the principal continued. "He even had the whole class practicing how to safely call 911 and make sure the person gets help. He said, 'You have to stay brave, just like Emily does.'" When I picked Liam up, his face was glowing. "Mom, did you hear? I told everyone about Emily. I want to be a superhero like her." Tears welled in my eyes as I hugged him tightly. "You already are, Liam. You always have been." A few months later, Emily came back to visit, and this time she didn't come alone. She brought with her a surprise, Her paramedic team, who were launching a new community initiative called Heroes for a Day, aimed at teaching kids about emergency preparedness and how they could contribute to the safety of those around them. When Liam saw Emily walk through the door, his eyes lit up. "Emily, you're back." She smiled, crouching to his level. "I never really left, buddy. I'm just here to show you how you can help people, too." That afternoon, Emily led a small class for the kids in our neighborhood. Liam, who had been so passionate about helping others, took charge in his own quiet way. As Emily talked about CPR, first aid, and basic emergency response, Liam shared what he'd learned at school, explaining how heroes didn't always have to wear capes or uniforms. They just had to care. Watching Liam, I realized something important. Emily had started a movement. It wasn't just about saving lives in the traditional sense. It was about empowering people to take action, no matter how small. Emily had given Liam, and all the kids who met her, the belief that they could make a difference. And in doing so, she had created a ripple effect that was spreading across our community. "Mom," Liam said later that evening, his voice filled with wonder, "I think I know what I want to do when I grow up." "What's that, buddy?" "I want to be a hero, just like Emily. I want to help people and teach them how to help others, too. Maybe even save lives." My heart soared as I looked at my son. "I have no doubt you'll be amazing at it." Months turned into years, and Emily's influence continued to shape not only Liam's future, but our entire community. She had inspired a new generation of kids who knew the importance of being prepared, being kind, and being brave. Many of them went on to join volunteer programs, some pursuing careers in healthcare, and others simply making sure their neighbors were safe. As for Liam, his dream didn't fade. He worked hard in school, focusing on science, health, and community service. He spent hours with me, learning first aid, reading about medicine, and imagining his own path toward becoming a paramedic, just like Emily. One day, when Liam was old enough, Emily came back to town for a visit. Liam was now a young teenager, standing tall and confident, with that same look of determination I'd seen in him years ago. "Hey, Emily," Liam said with a grin. "I've been learning everything I can about first aid and emergency response. I want to be a paramedic, just like you." Emily's eyes softened with pride. "I knew you would, kiddo. I can't think of anyone better for the job." As they stood there, talking about the future, I realized that the hero's legacy wasn't just carried in the lives she had saved. It was carried in the lives of those she had touched. In the end, Emily had done more than just save one life. She had created a movement, passed down her knowledge, and sparked the courage in others to carry her torch forward. And that, to me, was the greatest gift of all. This continuation follows the ripple effect of Emily's influence on Liam and the broader community, showing how her heroism has inspired others to become heroes in their own right. Let me know what you think, or if you'd like more added. Years had passed since Emily's heroic influence had reshaped not just Liam's life, but the entire community's understanding of what it meant to be a hero. Liam had grown into a young man, determined and driven, with a heart full of compassion and a mind focused on helping others. He was no longer just following in Emily's footsteps. He was creating his own path, inspired by the lessons she had taught him. It was his first year of college when the unexpected happened. The world as we knew it seemed to shift overnight. A major disaster struck the region. An earthquake had devastated a neighboring town, and resources were stretched thin. The devastation was unimaginable. Entire neighborhoods wiped out, roads impassable, and a staggering number of people in need of urgent medical care. The moment the news hit, Liam knew what he had to do. "I have to help," he said firmly as he watched the television coverage with me. "I can't just sit here. People need me." I could see the determination in his eyes, the same resolve I'd seen in Emily. But this time, it wasn't just about following her example. It was about carrying forward the legacy of helping others, of never backing down when there was a call to action. "Liam, you're still in school," I said, a mixture of pride and concern in my voice. "You've got your future ahead of you. But I understand. This is your moment." He didn't hesitate. "I'm going, Mom. I have to be there for the people who need us. I know what to do." Before I could even process the weight of his words, Liam had gathered his things. His backpack was packed with first aid supplies, water, and essentials, ready to go. He was no longer a young boy following his superhero. It was clear. He was the superhero now. The next few days were a blur. I watched as Liam coordinated with other students from his medical program who had also felt the call to action. They set up emergency response teams, collecting supplies and contacting local organizations. They were all working under the guidance of professionals like Emily, who had been contacted to lead a volunteer force of paramedics and first responders. Liam worked tirelessly, following Emily's example, calm in the face of danger, quick to act when others hesitated, always thinking about what needed to be done. It wasn't long before Emily arrived, not just as a leader, but as a mentor for Liam and his peers. The day Liam finally saw her again, after so long, his face lit up. "Emily, I'm here. I'm ready." Emily, now a seasoned paramedic with years of experience, looked at Liam with a knowing smile. "I see you've become the hero you always wanted to be." Liam, humbled, nodded. "I learned from the best." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "We're all in this together now. Just remember, stay focused. And no matter how tough it gets, keep going. People are counting on us." As the days turned into weeks, Liam, Emily, and the volunteer teams worked tirelessly in the aftermath of the earthquake. They pulled people from wreckage, provided emergency medical care, and organized shelter for those who had lost everything. Through it all, Emily and Liam stood side by side, not as mentor and student anymore, but as equals. Two heroes working toward a common goal. At one point, when the stress was beginning to wear on everyone, I received a call from Emily. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the exhaustion beneath it. "Hey, just wanted to check in. Liam's been incredible. You've raised him well. But I wanted to remind you, he's ready. He's built for this. And you should be proud of him. He's already making a real difference." Tears welled up in my eyes. "Thank you, Emily, for everything. I'm so proud of him. And I'm proud of you, too. I don't think any of us realized how much you had shaped all of us. Until now." Emily's voice softened. "Sometimes we don't see the impact we have until it's too late. But you're right. This is our legacy. A new generation of heroes is rising. And it's all because of people like you and Liam who believe in what's possible." As the crisis began to subside and the community slowly began to rebuild, Liam returned home. His body bruised, his mind weary, but his heart stronger than ever. He had witnessed the raw power of human resilience and had been a part of something bigger than himself. It had changed him, just as it had changed Emily and everyone else who had joined in. When Liam walked through the door, his shoulders were heavy with the weight of the responsibility he had carried, but there was a sense of peace in his eyes. He had done everything he could, and he had saved lives. "Mom," he said, his voice gentle. "I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like I finally found my purpose. This is where I belong." I smiled, pulling him into a hug. "I knew you'd find it, Liam. I always knew you had it in you." It wasn't just Emily's influence anymore. It was the deep-rooted belief in helping others that had been passed down through generations. The legacy of heroism had taken root in Liam, in all the young people who had followed Emily's teachings, and it would continue to grow. That night, as Liam rested, I thought back to the beginning. The day I hired a babysitter. The day Emily had saved Liam's life. The little girl who had once been uncertain had grown into a woman who saved lives, who inspired others to do the same. And now, her legacy would live on through Liam and the many others who followed in their footsteps. The world had changed, but in the most beautiful way. Heroes were no longer just stories. They were real, and they were everywhere. In this continuation, we see how the impact of Emily's heroism extends into the future, not just through Liam, but through the entire community. His journey becomes the culmination of all the lessons learned, turning him into the hero he always aspired to be. Let me know if you'd like to add anything else. Years had passed since that life-altering disaster, and the world had shifted yet again. Liam had grown from a young man full of promise to a seasoned paramedic, making waves in the field of emergency response. His time working alongside Emily had set him on a path he never could have imagined back when he was a child. But it wasn't just about saving lives for Liam anymore. It was about inspiring others to step up when the world needed them most. But even heroes have their moments of doubt. And sometimes, the weight of responsibility can feel like too much to bear. One evening, months after the earthquake recovery had ended, I found Liam sitting alone on the porch, staring at the night sky. He was home for a brief break, but something was different. His usual confidence had been replaced with a quiet tension. "Hey, buddy, everything okay?" I asked, sitting down beside him. Liam looked at me, his brow furrowed. "I'm not sure, Mom. Lately, I've been feeling like I'm not doing enough. I know that sounds crazy, but after everything we've been through, I'm wondering if I'm really making a difference." My heart ached for him. He had seen so much, had done so much. But still, it wasn't enough. It never seemed enough when you were trying to save the world. You've done more than most people could ever dream of, Liam. You've saved lives, you've inspired so many, and you've shown people what true courage looks like. You are making a difference. He shook his head. "I know, but sometimes I wonder if it's just a drop in the ocean. I see all the suffering, all the things I can't fix. And then I think about Emily, how she just always knew what to do, how she always had the answers. I feel like I'm just still learning. I'm not sure I'm ready for the next step." I understood now. It wasn't that Liam doubted his abilities. It was that he had seen too much, learned too much, and felt the weight of a responsibility he hadn't asked for but had embraced nonetheless. "You're ready, Liam," I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You don't need to be perfect. What Emily taught you, what you've learned, is enough. You'll never have all the answers, but you have something even more important. The heart to keep trying. And that's what matters." He nodded, though I could still see the uncertainty in his eyes. "You know, Emily once told me that being a hero isn't about knowing everything or saving everyone. It's about showing up when it counts, even when you're not sure what's going to happen next," I continued. "It's about the people you help, the way you make them feel seen and heard. That's what makes you a hero, Liam." A small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "Thanks, Mom. I needed to hear that." I smiled back. "I know you did. You've got this. You always have." Not long after that conversation, an opportunity came knocking. An opportunity Liam couldn't ignore. A major health crisis had struck a distant region, one that had been underdeveloped and largely ignored by larger medical organizations. It was the perfect storm: an outbreak of disease, an overwhelmed healthcare system, and a lack of infrastructure. The area was in dire need of experienced medical professionals, and the call went out to those who had proven their worth in past disasters. Among the list of responders was Emily's name, but there was one more. Liam. Liam hesitated. This wasn't just another mission. It was a chance to lead. To take everything he had learned and apply it in ways that he'd never been asked to before. When he shared the news with me, I could see the conflict in his eyes. He was scared. Not for the danger, but for what this mission meant. It would stretch him beyond his limits, test him in ways he couldn't predict. But it was exactly what he had been preparing for. "Mom, this is bigger than anything I've ever done. It's terrifying. What if I fail? What if I'm not ready?" he asked, his voice tight. I looked at him and saw the man he had become. "Liam, you're not alone in this. Emily is with you. You have a team who believes in you. And most importantly, you believe in yourself. You've already done so much to make the world a better place. This is just the next step in your journey." I could see the weight lifting from his shoulders, just a little. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't." The day Liam left for the mission, it was different than the others. This time, it wasn't just a mission. It was the beginning of something much larger. Liam was no longer just the young man who had learned from Emily. He was stepping into her shoes as a leader, guiding others toward hope in a place filled with uncertainty. And Emily? She was right there beside him, supporting him, showing him that this was how heroes grew, by taking risks, by trusting themselves, and by continuing to learn even when the road ahead was unclear. Days turned into weeks, and Liam's updates were sporadic. I didn't know the full scope of what he was facing, but I knew it wasn't easy. He was fighting not only the crisis, but his own fears, stepping up in ways he hadn't imagined. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I got the call. Mom, we did it. We made it through. We saved lives and we got everyone the help they needed. It wasn't easy, but we did it. The relief in his voice brought tears to my eyes. I'm so proud of you, Liam. You did it. You led them. Liam was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, I could hear the difference in his voice. It was filled with certainty. I didn't do it alone. Emily. She taught me everything I needed to know. I just had to trust myself and trust the people around me. But now, I know. This is my calling. This is where I'm supposed to be. When Liam returned home, the community welcomed him with open arms. He had become more than just a paramedic. He had become a leader, a beacon of hope for those who had nothing left to give but their will to survive. And as for Emily, she wasn't finished yet either. She and Liam had grown into partners, each of them bringing something different to the table, but both with the same goal in mind: to help people, to save lives, and to inspire others to rise up when the world needed them most. In that moment, I realized that heroism was never about being perfect. It wasn't about knowing all the answers or never feeling scared. It was about showing up, even when you weren't sure what was going to happen. It was about the courage to take the first step, even if it meant leading others into the unknown. Liam's journey was far from over. It was just beginning. And with every challenge he faced, he would continue to grow, continue to inspire, and continue to remind us all that heroism was within each of us if we just believed. It had been years since Liam had taken his first steps into the world of emergency response, years since he had been mentored by Emily, and years since he had become a hero in his own right. Now, as a seasoned leader in the field, Liam found himself leading another mission that would be unlike any he had ever faced before. The stakes were higher, the danger more imminent, and the outcome uncertain. A powerful storm had struck a remote village, destroying buildings, wiping out entire sections of infrastructure, and leaving countless people trapped under rubble. The local authorities were overwhelmed, and the world had yet to send the help needed. Liam had been called in, alongside his team, to assess the damage and provide emergency care. He was the one they looked to for leadership. But this time, there was a twist. As the team navigated through the wreckage, Emily, who had always been by his side, suddenly disappeared from view. They had been separated in the chaos of the storm's aftermath. Liam's heart dropped as he scanned the debris, calling her name. "Emily, where are you?" His voice cracked under the weight of the panic creeping in. There was no answer. The storm raged on and time was slipping away. Liam's team had to keep moving, and yet he couldn't leave without her. He fought back the growing sense of dread in his chest, telling himself that she was fine, that she would emerge any moment with her usual calm and reassuring presence. But the hours passed. The storm didn't relent, and the search for Emily turned desperate. Liam's thoughts were racing. Could she have been caught in the rubble? What if she was seriously hurt? What if she didn't make it? As dusk began to fall, Liam found himself standing over a pile of debris that once had been a house, a school, a place of life. His team had already combed through most of the wreckage, but something in his gut told him that Emily might be there, somewhere under the ruins, waiting for help, just like the countless others they had saved in the past. "Liam," a voice called, breaking him from his thoughts. It was one of his team members, panting from exhaustion. "We've got something. We think we found Emily." Liam's heart skipped a beat, and he sprinted toward the source of the voice, his legs heavy with the weight of uncertainty. He rounded the corner and saw them, his team huddled around the wreckage. And there, buried under a pile of wooden beams and bricks, was Emily's lifeless body. The world seemed to stop for a moment. No, 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 Liam whispered, his voice barely audible as he rushed forward. He pushed through the debris, his hands trembling, desperately searching for any sign of life. He found her wrist first. The cold skin felt like ice against his fingers. Tears blurred his vision, but he didn't stop. He continued to dig, his breath shallow, his heart pounding in his chest. Then, as if by some miracle, her eyes fluttered open. "Emily," Liam gasped, his voice breaking. "Emily, please, stay with me. Stay with us." Her lips parted, and though her voice was weak, it carried the strength that had always defined her. "Liam, you've always been ready. Always ready to lead. Remember that. You're the hero now. You are the one who will make a difference." Liam didn't know what to say. He was overwhelmed with relief, with sorrow, with love and fear all at once. But he knew what he had to do. He couldn't let her go. With trembling hands, he lifted her from the rubble, carrying her in his arms as though he was holding his own heart. He didn't know if she would survive, but he wasn't going to leave her behind. Not after everything they had been through. Not after everything she had done for him. And for the world. "I'm not going to leave you, Emily," he promised, his voice a whisper of resolve. "You taught me how to be brave. Now let me return the favor." But as Liam carried her through the debris, there was a growing weight in his chest. He could feel the life slipping from her. Emily's breathing became shallow, her body cold against his chest. She was fading. I'm proud of you, Liam," she whispered weakly, the words barely making it past her lips. You've become the hero. I always knew you were." Tears streamed down Liam's face as he ran toward the makeshift medical tent that had been set up on the outskirts of the village. He shouted for help, but deep down, he knew the truth. Emily had given everything. She had been the light, the guide, and now that light was dimming. By the time they reached the tent, it was too late. Emily was gone. The weeks that followed were a blur of grief, recovery, and reflection. Liam stayed on the front lines, leading the rescue efforts and helping the survivors rebuild. But each night, as the stars blanketed the sky, he found himself haunted by Emily's final words. "You are the hero now." He had been ready to follow her, to learn from her, to always have her by his side. But now he understood. Emily's legacy wasn't just about her acts of heroism. It was about the fire she sparked in others. It was about him, and every other person she had inspired. As the months passed, Liam became not only a symbol of hope in the aftermath of the storm, but a beacon of the legacy she had passed down to him. He had embraced his role, not because he was the perfect hero, but because he was willing to continue the fight, even when the world seemed to crumble. And as he stood on the edge of the rebuilt village, looking out over the people whose lives they had saved, he knew. This was the true meaning of heroism. It was never about fame or recognition. It was about never giving up, no matter the cost. The storm had passed, but Liam's journey had only just begun. And though Emily was gone, her spirit, her strength would continue to guide him, to lead him, to remind him that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who don't give up, even when the end feels near. In the end, I went on a date and found out they were my sibling. I met Alex on a dating app. We clicked instantly. Our banter was effortless, and we liked all the same things. Bad reality TV, deep dish pizza, and old school rock music. It felt like fate. So after 2 weeks of texting nonstop, we decided to meet in person. The restaurant was a cozy Italian spot downtown. When I arrived, Alex was already there, sipping a glass of wine. They stood up, smiling. "Hey, you made it." I sat across from them, feeling a weird mix of nerves and excitement. Of course, I've been looking forward to this all week. Dinner was amazing. We laughed about childhood stories. Turns out we both had a pet turtle growing up. We both loved road trips and swore by the rule that car snacks were more important than gas stops. There was even a strange coincidence. Both our moms called us their little explorer when we were kids. This is kind of crazy, Alex said, twirling their pasta. I don't think I've ever met someone I have so much in common with. I know, right? I chuckled. It's like we could be related. That's when it happened. Alex froze, mid-bite. Wait. Their smile faltered. Your mom's name is Linda, right? I blinked. Yeah. How do you know that? They set down their fork. Because my mom's name is Linda, too. A nervous laugh bubbled out of me. Oh, come on. That's just another coincidence. Alex's face had gone pale. And your dad? You said he left when you were little? Yeah, when I was 3. My stomach twisted. Why? Alex exhaled sharply, rubbing their temples. Mine left too. When I was 5. The restaurant blurred around me. No way. Alex reached for their phone, hands shaking. Do you have any pictures of him? I didn't. Mom had burned every single one. But I did remember his name. Daniel Carter. Alex visibly flinched. Their fingers hovered over their phone screen before turning it to me. A grainy, old photograph filled the screen, of a man in his 20s, grinning in front of a car. I recognized the car. It was the only thing I had left from my father, a rusted old Mustang sitting in my mom's garage. My heart slammed against my ribs. Oh my God. Alex pushed their chair back, looking equally horrified. We have the same dad. I felt like throwing up. This wasn't just some bad rom-com plot. This was real. My date, the person I'd been flirting with for weeks, was my half-sibling. We stared at each other in stunned silence. Then, at the same time, we both grabbed for the wine bottle and poured ourselves another glass. Well, Alex finally said, forcing a laugh. I guess we won't be going on a second date. Nope. I swallowed the wine in one gulp. Definitely not. The awkwardness sat between us like an overcooked pasta dish neither of us wanted to acknowledge. Alex was the first to break the silence. So, do we just pretend this never happened? Or do we, I don't know, exchange sibling bracelets or something? I let out a short, dry laugh. I think we're supposed to do the whole dramatic reunion thing. You know, hug, cry, maybe yell at our dad for being a dirtbag. Alex groaned. Great. I always wanted a long-lost sibling, just not like this. I wasn't sure how to feel. Just hours ago, I had been nervously excited about this date. Now, I was sitting across from my newly discovered half-sibling, trying to process the fact that we had almost kissed if this night had gone differently. I shuddered at the thought. Okay, first rule. We never speak of this again. Alex nodded. Agreed. The universe doesn't need to know how close we came to starring in our own messed-up soap opera. We both took another sip of wine. The initial horror was starting to settle into something else. Something strangely comforting. So, Alex said after a beat, twirling their empty glass. I guess we should talk about the elephant in the room. Our dad? I asked. Yeah. Have you ever tried looking for him? I shook my head. Number my mom made it clear he was the kind of guy who didn't stick around. I figured if he wanted to find me, he would. Alex sighed. Same. I used to be angry about it, but after a while, I just stopped thinking about him. We sat there for a moment, digesting everything. It was weird. Our dad had abandoned us both, but in some twisted way, he had accidentally reunited us. After another pause, I gave Alex a small smile. You know, if we hadn't met like this, I think we'd actually be great friends. They grinned. Right? I was literally thinking the same thing. Minus the whole almost dating disaster, I kind of like having you around. I smirked. Well, lucky you. You're stuck with me now. It's kind of a sibling rule. Alex groaned dramatically. Ugh, does this mean I have to buy you birthday presents? Absolutely. They rolled their eyes but laughed, and somehow the night didn't feel so disastrous anymore. By the time we left the restaurant, things didn't feel awkward anymore. We had walked in as almost lovers, but were leaving as something far stranger, and maybe even better, a family. Alex and I walked out of the restaurant together, still reeling from what had just happened. The cold night air hit my face, making everything feel even more surreal. So, do we just go home now and pretend this was some fever dream? I asked, half joking. Alex smirked. Tempting. But now that I know I have a sibling, I kind of want to know more. About you, about Mom, even about him. Him, of course, meant our father. The man who had disappeared from both of our lives without a trace. I hesitated. I had spent my whole life not caring about him, shoving any curiosity deep down. But now I had a sibling who had been left behind just like me. You know what? I said, taking a deep breath. Maybe we should find him. Alex raised an eyebrow. Seriously? I shrugged. If nothing else, I want answers. I want to know why he left. I want to know if he has more kids out there. Who knows? We might have a whole secret family. Alex let out a dramatic groan. Ugh, please no, I don't think I can handle another accidental sibling romance. I laughed. Fair point. But come on, don't you at least want to know? They exhaled, running a hand through their hair. Yeah, I do. And just like that, we made a pact. The next day, we met at a coffee shop, laptops open, ready to dig into the mystery of Daniel Carter. So, Alex said, typing furiously, did your mom ever mention where he went after he left? I shook my head. Nope. She never talked about him at all. Like, zero information. Alex sighed. Same, but I did some research last night. There's a guy named Daniel Carter who lived in our city about 20 years ago, but then he moved to Arizona. Think that could be him? Arizona? That was far. Only one way to find out, I said, clicking on a link. The page loaded, revealing a blurry photo from what looked like an old newspaper article. It was a local business spotlight from years ago, featuring a man who looked eerily familiar. Same dark eyes, same sharp jawline. Alex and I exchanged a look. That's him, they whispered. A chill ran down my spine. After all these years, we finally had a lead. Now the question was, what would we do with it? We sat there in stunned silence, staring at the blurry picture of Daniel Carter. The man in the photo didn't just look like our father. He was him. The dark eyes, the slight smirk, the messy hair. Every detail screamed familiarity. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a mix of excitement, anger, and disbelief. Alex was the first to speak. So, Arizona, huh? That's a long way to go just to dodge responsibility. I snorted, feeling a wave of frustration. Yeah, and how does someone just get to leave their kids and start fresh somewhere else? What kind of person does that? Alex leaned back in their chair, folding their arms. The kind who clearly doesn't deserve a reunion. That thought stung. I had spent so long convincing myself that my father didn't matter, that he was just some guy who didn't care enough to stick around. But now, knowing that he had moved on, built a life somewhere else, it made me angry in ways I hadn't expected. I don't know, I said, breaking the silence. I still want to meet him. Get some kind of closure. Alex shot me a look. Closure? From a guy who bailed out on us? Maybe. Or maybe I just need to hear him say it. Hear him admit he made a mistake. Alex hesitated, then nodded. I get that. But honestly, I think we're both going to have to come to terms with the fact that he's probably not the person we've imagined him to be. He might not even care about us. I didn't want to hear it, but I knew deep down that Alex was right. Our father might have left us once, but now, seeing him from a distance, this stranger who shared our blood, he might not even want to meet us. Arizona, I muttered. It's not that far. Maybe we could go visit him. The idea was ridiculous, but also somehow exhilarating. Alex raised an eyebrow. Wait, are you saying we should just show up on his doorstep? Well, we've got nothing to lose, right? I shrugged. I don't even know if he'll be there, but at least we'll know we tried. Alex stared at me for a moment and then, finally, smiled. You're a weird person, but okay, let's do it. Road trip to Arizona, find Dad, and maybe get some answers. But no weird sibling bonding after, all right? Agreed, I said, laughing despite the nervous energy coursing through me. We spent the next few days planning our trip. The more I thought about it, the more surreal it all became. A week ago, I had no idea that I had a sibling, let alone a father to track down in Arizona. It felt like I was stepping into a different life entirely. On the day of our trip, Alex and I piled into my car, bags stuffed with snacks, maps, and all the stuff needed for a road trip. We left the city early, the sun barely rising over the horizon. The drive was filled with half-jokes and deep conversations, our bond growing with each mile. We talked about everything, our childhoods, what we'd imagined family to be, and what we hoped to find when we finally met our father. As the miles stretched on, I felt a sense of anticipation settle in my stomach. The closer we got to Arizona, the more the reality of our mission hit me. We were really going to do this. We finally arrived in the small town where our father supposedly lived. It felt strange. Everything was so normal, so suburban. A far cry from the chaotic, dysfunctional idea I had built in my mind about him. We found the address, parked in front of a modest house, and sat there for a while, unsure of what to do next. Should we knock? Alex asked. Or just wait until he shows up at the door with a tray of cookies and says, "I've been waiting for you two my whole life"? I snorted. You'd be the first person to faint if that happened. Alex chuckled. True. But seriously, what's the plan here? We knock and say what? I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I don't know. Hey, we're your kids. You left us and we've been looking for you for years. Simple enough, right? Alex gave me a look. You sure you want to go in there and have that conversation? Before I could respond, the door creaked open. A man stepped out, older now, his hair graying at the temples, but with the same face I had seen in that photograph. He looked at us, confused at first, and then his eyes widened. Who are you? I felt the world stop. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for. The moment I would find out if he was ready to answer for everything. I opened my mouth to speak, but Alex beat me to it. We're your kids. The words hung in the air like an electric charge. We stood there, frozen, staring at the man who, by blood, was our father. His face went pale, and for a second he looked as though he might faint. Then his expression flickered between disbelief, guilt, and something else I couldn't quite place. You're my kids? His voice cracked slightly, like he couldn't believe it. Yeah, I said, my heart pounding in my chest. Daniel Carter, right? We've been looking for you. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. He just stood there, blinking at us as if we were some strange apparition. Then his eyes flicked over to me and Alex, pausing on our faces as if trying to process it all. I don't understand, he stammered. I didn't think I'd ever see either of you again. Alex crossed their arms, their voice tight. Yeah, well, we've got questions. A lot of questions. My stomach twisted. This wasn't going how I imagined it would. I thought I'd have this big, dramatic moment, maybe some tears, maybe a fight. But instead, he just seemed lost. Can we come in? I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. He nodded slowly, stepping aside to let us in. The house was small but cozy, one of those places that had clearly seen better days. There was a faint smell of old wood and faded books in the air. It felt like time had stopped here. We sat down in his living room, the tension thick as we waited for him to say something. After a while, Daniel finally spoke, his voice quieter now, as though he was choosing his words carefully. I didn't know how to find you, he said, his eyes meeting mine. Your mother, she made it clear I wasn't wanted in your lives. I thought you were better off without me. I couldn't hide the anger that flared up inside me. You didn't even try to find us, did you? You just disappeared, left us to pick up the pieces. Alex shifted uncomfortably in their seat. That's not good enough, Dad. You left us with nothing but questions. You think we could just move on from that? Daniel looked down at his hands, his shoulders sagging. I wasn't proud of what I did, but I was young. I made mistakes, and I thought I was doing the right thing by leaving. I almost laughed. The right thing? By abandoning your kids? He winced. I thought it would be easier on all of us. Your mother and I? Things were bad between us. I thought I was just causing more harm by staying. So you thought disappearing was the solution? I shot back, frustration creeping into my voice. Alex gave me a nudge, urging me to calm down. We just need to understand why. Why didn't you try to come back? Why didn't you ever reach out? Daniel's eyes welled with tears, and for the first time I saw genuine regret in them. I was scared. I didn't think you'd want anything to do with me. I failed you both. And now, I don't know if I can make it right. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words hitting me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't some heartless monster standing before us. It was a man who had lived with his choices, who had seen the consequences of his actions. Alex spoke softly, almost as if to themselves. We don't know what to do with all this. You can't just show up after all this time and expect us to forget everything. I looked at Alex, then back at Daniel. This wasn't about forgiveness. Not yet. We needed time. But I couldn't just walk away without saying what had been on my mind for years. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said, my voice shaky. But I do know this. We're here now. And we're not leaving until we get some answers. For us, for the lives you missed. Daniel's face crumbled and he nodded. I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I'm just glad you're here. For the rest of the afternoon, we talked. Slowly, cautiously, as though we were all walking on thin ice. Daniel answered questions, explained his side, and offered what little apology he could. But the truth was, there was no easy answer to what happened. He couldn't undo the past, and neither could we. When we finally stood to leave, Daniel seemed smaller. Like the years of avoidance and guilt had taken their toll. I'm sorry, he said one last time. I wish things had been different. I looked at Alex, who met my gaze with the same complicated mix of emotions. And then I turned back to Daniel. We're not saying goodbye forever, I said, my voice steady now. But this is a start, and we'll figure out what comes next. Together. As we walked out the door, the sun setting behind us, I felt a strange sense of peace settle in. There was still so much left to unpack, so many questions unanswered. But for the first time, we had opened the door. And maybe, just maybe, we could start rebuilding what had been broken so long ago. Alex nudged me. Well, that wasn't as awful as I thought it would be. I smiled. Yeah, not exactly a hallmark moment, but I think it's a start. Agreed, Alex said, their eyes glinting with something close to hope. Who knows? Maybe we'll even get to enjoy Thanksgiving this year. I laughed, feeling the first genuine lightness in my chest in weeks. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like we were walking through it alone. We had found each other after all, and maybe that was enough for now. The weeks after that encounter with Daniel passed in a blur. The awkwardness of meeting our father had faded, replaced by something that felt like a slow, hesitant truce. We kept in touch with him sporadically, checking in every now and then, and though it wasn't the reunion of dreams, it was something I never thought we'd have. The most surprising part, though, was how much our bond as siblings grew. Alex and I had gone from strangers to something close to family in the span of a few weeks. We texted every day, shared embarrassing stories from our childhoods, and even began planning more adventures together. we still didn't know how to process our past. But we started carving out a new future, one where we were no longer alone. It felt weird at first, like I was building a new life on top of an old one. But as time passed, it started to feel normal. Then came the phone call. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I picked up the phone. The screen said, "Mom," but when I answered, it wasn't her voice that greeted me. "Hey, it's me," Daniel said, sounding uncharacteristically nervous. "Dad?" My heart skipped a beat. Why was he calling? "Yeah. Listen, I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I know I've missed a lot of time, but I was wondering if you two might be interested in coming out here for Thanksgiving. Maybe we could start fresh. Together." Thanksgiving. I hadn't celebrated with him in years, hadn't even considered it. But now that the invitation was on the table, I found myself filled with an odd mix of excitement and dread. I glanced at my phone, where Alex had already messaged me. "Call me. Important." I dialed Alex's number immediately. "Yo," they answered after the first ring. "What's up?" "You will not believe who just called me," I said, pacing around the apartment. "Let me guess. Dad?" "Yeah. He wants us to come out to Arizona for Thanksgiving." There was a long pause. "Wait, what?" "I know, it's crazy, right?" Alex didn't respond right away, and I could practically feel their mind racing. After a moment, they said, "Well, do you think we should go?" "It's kind of a big deal." "I don't know. I mean, it feels like everything's moving so fast, but maybe we should give it a shot. We've been talking about trying to rebuild, right?" "True. But are we ready for that?" I didn't have an answer. Honestly, I wasn't sure. But a part of me felt like this was the only way forward. If we didn't try, we'd always wonder what could have been. "I don't know," I said, sinking into the couch. "I guess I'm just scared. What if it doesn't work out? What if this whole thing blows up in our faces?" "I get it," Alex replied, their voice softer now. "But maybe, just maybe, this is our shot. If we don't go, we'll never know if we could have made it work. It's Thanksgiving, right? A fresh start. Not perfect, but maybe something worth trying." Their words made sense, and I took a deep breath. "Okay, we'll go." "All right," Alex said. "Let's do this. Family Thanksgiving. This could either be really great or super awkward. Either way, I'm in." We made our decision. A week later, we packed our bags, took a flight to Arizona, and landed in the small town where Daniel lived. The air was dry, the sun setting behind the distant mountains, casting everything in an amber glow. It looked so different from the city we had left behind. Daniel picked us up from the airport, and even though the tension was still there, an invisible barrier we hadn't yet crossed, it was different this time. We weren't walking in as strangers, but as two people trying to build something new. When we arrived at his house, it felt surreal. There was a table set with a modest Thanksgiving dinner: turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, and pie. It wasn't the big family gathering I'd imagined, but it felt like a start. Daniel looked at us nervously as we sat down. "I know it's not much," he said quietly, "but I wanted to do something for you. I don't know how to make up for all the time we've lost, but I'm trying." I exchanged a glance with Alex, who gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Thanks," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. It's a start." And so we ate. Slowly, cautiously at first, but as the evening went on, something began to shift. We shared stories, laughed about small things, and even poked fun at each other. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. There were no grand confessions or tearful apologies, but there was a subtle, almost tentative understanding between us. When dessert came around, Daniel hesitated. "I don't know what the future holds for us," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I want you to know I'm here now. I'll be here, if you'll have me." We didn't say anything right away. Instead, Alex took my hand under the table, and we squeezed each other's fingers tightly. Maybe it wasn't about rushing into forgiveness. Maybe it was about taking one step forward, even if that step was small. Thanks, Dad, Alex said, their voice steady. We'll see what happens. One day at a time, right? I smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle in. Yeah, one day at a time. And for the first time, I believed it. Maybe we were still a little broken. Maybe things would never be as they once were. But we were here. We had come this far. And maybe that was enough. The dinner came to an end, and the evening seemed to stretch on, suspended in an uneasy but hopeful quiet. We'd made it through the first big hurdle, sharing a meal, sitting at the same table. It was progress. It felt like a fragile kind of peace, one that might crumble at the slightest push. But for the first time in years, it didn't feel like we were drowning in the past. It felt possible. Daniel sat back in his chair, his eyes flicking between Alex and me, as though he was waiting for some kind of acknowledgement, some sign that we were ready to make the next move. Look, Daniel started, his voice strained with the weight of everything unsaid. I know it's going to take time. You don't owe me forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm not running away this time. I'm not going anywhere. Alex didn't respond immediately. They just stared at him, their face unreadable. I could feel the tension building again, the air so thick you could almost cut it with a knife. We hadn't talked about the things that still mattered. The anger, the abandonment, the years of pain that Daniel's silence had caused. How could we just pretend that didn't exist? The silence between us became deafening. The kind of silence where all the things you didn't want to say came rushing to the surface. I don't know if I can just let it go, Alex finally said, their voice low but cutting. You left us. You disappeared for years and you expect us to just accept that? Like it was nothing? The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. He flinched, his eyes briefly darting to the table before he met our gaze again. I know, he whispered. I know. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't strong enough. I thought if I left, maybe things would get better. For everyone. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. Wrong? I snapped, suddenly rising to my feet. You think you were wrong? You didn't just get it wrong, Dad. You ruined things. You ruined us. The room seemed to hold its breath as my voice rose, an echo of all the years of rage that had been buried inside me, the hurt I'd never known how to express, the anger that had festered since the moment he walked away. Do you know what it's like, Dad? I continued, my words coming faster now. To grow up feeling like you're broken, like something's missing inside of you and never know why? To spend every year wondering where you are, why you didn't care enough to come back? We needed you, and you were nowhere to be found. I saw Daniel's face twist in pain, but I didn't care. I needed him to hear it. He needed to hear the weight of the years that he had just let go. I never wanted to hurt you, Daniel said, his voice cracking. But I hurt you, and I hurt myself too. I know there's no excuse for what I did, and I'm so sorry. I shook my head, my vision blurry from the tears that had started to well up in my eyes. Sorry doesn't change anything. You can't just say sorry and expect it to be okay. The room was silent for a moment, and I could feel the weight of my words hanging in the air. It wasn't enough to make him understand. It wasn't enough to fix everything. We had all been broken by the years he had been gone. There was no way to undo that damage. And yet, in the depths of my anger, I felt a shift. A tiny, almost imperceptible shift. Something was changing between us, but it was a slow burn. It wouldn't be easy and it wouldn't be quick. But maybe, just maybe, it was worth fighting for. I don't know if we'll ever get back to what we should have been, I said, my voice softer now, as I looked at Alex and then at Daniel. But I don't want to just walk away from you. Not now. Not again. Alex was quiet for a long time, their face unreadable. Then finally they spoke, their words heavy with meaning. I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where we forgive you, but I do know that we're here now. That's all I can promise. Daniel nodded, his eyes glistening with tears that he was trying to hide. He took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping as if a weight had been lifted. Thank you. Thank you both. I know it'll take time, but I'll be here, and I'll prove to you that I mean it. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. He wasn't perfect. Far from it. But I could see the pain, the regret, the effort in his eyes. It was a start. Not the end of our story, but maybe the beginning of something that had been waiting for years to unfold. As we stood up to leave, the air seemed lighter. Not perfect, not fixed, but a little less heavy. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was drowning in the silence of the past. Alex grabbed my hand, giving it a tight squeeze. One day at a time, right? They said, their voice filled with determination. Yeah, I whispered back. One day at a time. As we walked out the door, a cold wind blew through the night, but it didn't feel like the storm was over. It felt like it was finally beginning. And maybe, just maybe, we would weather it together. And though the road ahead would be long and uncertain, I knew that this was a story we weren't done telling yet. I caught my best friend cheating with my spouse. I always thought betrayal was something that happened to other people. The kind of drama you see on TV or hear about in whispered conversations at dinner parties. But never to me. Never by the two people I trusted the most. It started with the little things. My husband, James, had been coming home later than usual. Always some excuse. Work ran late, traffic was bad, or he was just exhausted. Then there was Olivia, my best friend since college. She started canceling our plans last minute. Something came up, she'd say, her texts shorter than usual. I chalked it up to life just getting in the way, but deep down, an unease settled in my chest. One evening, I sat alone in our dimly lit living room, absent-mindedly scrolling through my phone. James had told me he was working late again, and Olivia had blown me off for the third time that week. A nagging feeling gnawed at me. Then, a notification popped up. Olivia's Instagram story. I clicked on it, expecting some generic photo of her cat or a coffee cup. But what I saw made my stomach drop. The image was blurry, a candlelit dinner setting, 2 glasses of wine, and a familiar-looking hand reaching across the table. James's hand. I recognized the watch I had gifted him last Christmas. My breath caught in my throat. My hands trembled as I took a screenshot. Could it be? Maybe it was just my paranoia. Maybe she was with someone else and it only looked like James. But I needed to know. I grabbed my keys and rushed out the door, my heart hammering in my chest. My mind raced with possibilities. What if I was wrong? What if this was all just a misunderstanding? But if I was right? I pulled up outside the restaurant Olivia's post had tagged. Through the window, I saw them. James leaning in, Olivia laughing, her fingers grazing his arm in a way that made my blood boil. It wasn't just friendly. It wasn't innocent. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My best friend, my husband, the 2 people who were supposed to have my back. And here they were, acting like they were the ones in love. My vision blurred with rage and heartbreak. I could have walked away. Could have gone home and figured out how to process this later. But I didn't. I pushed open the door, my heels clicking against the polished floor. Heads turned, but I only saw them. James looked up, his face draining of color. Olivia froze, her wine glass halfway to her lips. Having a nice evening? My voice was steady, but my insides were screaming. James stammered. It's not what it looks like. Olivia swallowed hard. It's complicated. I let out a bitter laugh. Complicated? You mean betraying your best friend and your wife? The restaurant had gone silent. People were staring. I didn't care. James reached for my hand, but I pulled away like his touch burned. Please, let's talk. No? I took a step back. I trusted you both. And this is what you do? Olivia opened her mouth, but no words came out. She knew there was no excuse, no apology that would fix this. I turned on my heel and walked out, my heart shattered, but my dignity intact. That night, I packed my bags. James begged, pleaded, promised it wasn't serious, that he had made a mistake. But there are some things you don't come back from. As I walked out the door, I didn't look back. Betrayal doesn't deserve a second chance. And neither did they. I didn't cry. Not that night. Not the next morning. I was too numb, too furious, too disgusted. James called, texted, left voicemails begging me to talk. Olivia tried too, sending pathetic messages like, "I never meant to hurt you." But I ignored them both. Instead, I focused on moving forward. I crashed at my sister's place for a few nights, grateful that she didn't push me to talk. She just handed me wine, put on reality TV, and let me sit in silence. But silence doesn't last forever. On the fourth day, I got a text from an unknown number. "I need to tell you something about James and Olivia. It's important." My stomach flipped. I hesitated before replying. "Who is this?" A few seconds later, another message popped up. "Meet me at Cafe Luna at 6 p.m. I promise this is something you need to know." I should have ignored it. I should have blocked the number and focused on picking up the pieces of my life. But curiosity, or maybe the need for closure, won. At 6 p.m., I walked into the cafe, scanning the room. A woman in her early 30s sat in the corner, nervously stirring her coffee. Her eyes met mine, and I could tell she recognized me. "You're Emily, right?" she asked. I nodded cautiously. "And you are?" She hesitated. "Sophie." The name meant nothing to me. "Okay. And you know something about James and Olivia?" I pressed. Sophie inhaled sharply. "Yeah, I was engaged to James before you were." My breath caught in my throat. "What?" She gave a humorless laugh. "We were together for 5 years. I thought we were happy, but then I caught him cheating with my best friend." I froze. The room tilted for a moment as her words sank in. Déjà vu. "You're lying," I whispered, even though I knew deep down she wasn't. She shook her head. "I wish I were, but James has a pattern. He always goes after the people closest to him. He makes you feel safe, makes you think you're his whole world, and then he rips it away." A sharp pain bloomed in my chest. James had done this before. I wasn't the first. I clenched my fists. "Why are you telling me this?" Sophie gave me a sad smile. "Because no one warned me, and I don't want you to waste another second on him." I sat back, my mind racing. James wasn't just a cheater. He was a serial betrayer, and suddenly I knew exactly what I needed to do. The next morning, I sent James a simple text. "Let's talk. Dinner at the house. Just us." He responded instantly. "Yes. Thank you. I love you." I smirked. Oh, this was going to be fun. That evening, I set the table for 2, lit candles, and put on a dress he always loved. I wanted him to think he had a chance. That maybe, just maybe, I was considering forgiving him. When he arrived, he looked nervous but hopeful. "Emily, I held up a hand. "Not yet. Let's eat first." I poured us both wine, pretending to sip mine as he downed his in relief. Then I spoke. "You know," I said sweetly, "I ran into someone interesting yesterday." James stiffened. "Oh?" "Sophie," I continued, watching his face. His expression flickered for just a second. Panic, guilt before he forced a chuckle. "I don't know a Sophie." I smiled. "Oh, but you do. She's your ex-fiancé, the one you cheated on with her best friend." James went pale. I leaned in. "Tell me, James, was Olivia your endgame?" Or just another in a long line of betrayals? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I stood up. You see, I'm done being another one of your mistakes. So I'd like you to leave. James blinked. Wait, what? You said we'd talk? I grinned. We did, and now we're done. Then I walked to the front door and opened it. You can go now. James stood there, stunned. Emily, please. I crossed my arms. Oh, and one more thing? His eyes were desperate. Anything. I smirked. You might want to check your bank account. I transferred half of our savings to a new account in my name. Consider it compensation for my wasted time. His mouth dropped open. You can't? Oh, but I did. I shrugged. Should have read the fine print when we merged finances, darling. Guess you never thought I would betray you. And with that, I slammed the door in his face. As I turned around, I let out the first real laugh I'd had in days. It wasn't just closure. It was justice. James banged on the door for a full minute before he finally gave up. I listened as his footsteps faded down the driveway, then let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It was over. Or so I thought. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages. My phone buzzed with calls from mutual friends, unread texts from Olivia, and one particularly nasty voicemail from James. Emily, what the hell did you do? His voice was frantic. I checked my account. You stole my money. This is illegal. You can't just... Delete. I wasn't about to waste my energy on his tantrum. But Olivia's messages caught my eye. Olivia. Emily, please, I need to explain. Olivia. I never wanted this to happen. Olivia. James lied to me too. Olivia. Please meet me. Just once. I owe you the truth. A part of me wanted to block her, to erase her from my life like she had never existed. But another part? The part that needed to understand why, decided otherwise. We met at a quiet park later that afternoon. Olivia sat on a bench looking more disheveled than I had ever seen her. Her eyes were puffy, her hair a mess. For a split second, I felt a twinge of satisfaction. Good. She should be miserable. She looked up as I approached. Thank you for coming. Make it quick, I said coldly, crossing my arms. She swallowed. I was stupid, Emily. I believed him when he said you two were already falling apart. He made it sound like you didn't love him anymore, that you were just coexisting. I scoffed. And you just happened to fall onto his lap, right? She winced. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I swear I didn't plan for this to happen. He was relentless. I held up a hand. I don't need your excuses. I need to know one thing. She nodded. Anything. I narrowed my eyes. Are you still with him? She hesitated. Then her face crumpled. No, she whispered. A bitter laugh escaped me. He dumped you already, didn't he? Tears welled in her eyes, and that was all the confirmation I needed. Of course he did. James was a user, a manipulator. And Olivia, just like me, had been disposable to him. Wow, I said, shaking my head. You threw away our friendship for nothing. She sniffled. I know. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, I took a deep breath. I won't pretend this didn't destroy me, Olivia. You were my best friend. My sister in every way but blood. And you chose to betray me. She looked down. I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I nodded slowly. Good. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't hate her. Not anymore. She wasn't worth it. In the weeks that followed, I took control of my life. I got a lawyer, started divorce proceedings, and made sure James got nothing but regret. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who truly cared about me. I threw myself into work, into traveling, into living. And one evening, as I sat at a rooftop bar overlooking the city, sipping a glass of wine, I realized something. I was free. I wasn't the woman who had been cheated on. I wasn't the woman who had been betrayed. I was me again. And that was the best revenge of all. Months passed. The divorce was finalized, and I officially severed every tie to James. Olivia, predictably, faded into the background. She moved to another city, probably trying to outrun the mess she helped create. I thought I had seen the last of them. I was wrong. One evening, as I curled up on my couch with a glass of wine, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Unknown. Emily. It's James. Please don't block me. I just need to talk. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering in my chest. What could he possibly want now? Curiosity won over logic. I typed back, me. You have nothing to say that I want to hear. His response came instantly. James, I know I don't deserve your time, but I need you to know. I made a mistake. I snorted. No kidding. James, I lost everything, Emily. You, my job, my reputation. Olivia left me too. That last part made me smirk. Of course she had. They were never meant to last. Then came the kicker. James, I miss you. I actually laughed out loud. This man had the audacity to ruin my life, and now, what? He expected sympathy? A second chance? I decided to play along. Me. Miss me, or miss what I did for you? A pause. Then, James. Both. I shook my head. Pathetic. I agreed to meet him. Not because I wanted him back. God, no, but because I wanted to see the mess he had become. When I walked into the cafe, James was already there. He looked bad. Unshaven, tired. His once pristine suit wrinkled. Wow, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. You look like hell. He rubbed his hands together nervously. I deserve that. I tilted my head. So? Say what you need to say. James sighed. I know I hurt you. I lost control. I made the worst mistake of my life, and now I have nothing. I raised an eyebrow. Sounds like a you problem. He flinched. I don't expect you to forgive me. I wanted to see you, to remember what I lost. I leaned in, locking eyes with him. Let me make something very clear, James. You didn't lose me. You threw me away. You don't get to miss me now that you're miserable. He swallowed hard. Emily, I held up a hand. Number, we're done. And we always will be. Then I stood, dropped a 20 on the table for my coffee, and walked away without looking back. As I stepped outside, the weight on my chest lifted completely. For the first time in a long time, I felt nothing for him. No anger, no sadness, just freedom. And that was the best revenge of all. Walking out of that cafe felt like shutting the last door to my past. The moment I stepped onto the sidewalk, I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs with crisp evening air. For the first time in a long time, I was truly free. But life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. A week after my final conversation with James, I found myself at an art gallery opening. My friend Lily had practically dragged me there, insisting I needed to get out and breathe in some culture instead of my ex's bad energy. As I wandered through the exhibits, pretending to admire abstract paintings I didn't understand, someone bumped into me. Hard. Oh, I'm so sorry, a deep voice said. I turned, ready to dismiss the apology, but froze when I met a pair of striking hazel eyes. The man in front of me was tall, with dark tousled hair and a 5 o'clock shadow that made him look effortlessly handsome. He was holding a glass of wine, his shirt slightly unbuttoned, his expression amused. Didn't mean to nearly knock you over, he said, smiling. I blinked. Wow. No worries. I managed, composing myself. It's an art gallery, not a wrestling ring. He chuckled. True. I just get a little too into my thoughts when I look at pieces like this. He gestured toward the painting behind me. It was a mess of colors, shapes, and seemingly random brushstrokes. I tilted my head. So, what deep interpretation do you have for this masterpiece? He grinned. Honestly, Looks like someone dropped their palette and called it art. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. Finally, someone who admits it, I said. He extended a hand. I'm Nathan, by the way. Emily. Nathan studied me for a second, then smirked. Tell me, Emily, do you come to these things often, or did someone force you here against your will? I narrowed my eyes playfully. Why do you assume I don't love art? He leaned in slightly. Because you were staring at the exit 5 seconds ago. I burst out laughing again. Damn, he was observant. Well, since I'm already exposed, I said, crossing my arms. What about you? Art lover or just here for the free wine? He raised his glass. Guilty. Something about him felt easy, light. The complete opposite of the emotional baggage I'd been carrying for so long. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready for something new. Over the next few weeks, Nathan and I kept running into each other. At coffee shops, at a bookstore, even at a farmer's market. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the universe was finally giving me a break. One evening, as we sat in a quiet little bar, sipping whiskey and sharing embarrassing childhood stories, he suddenly looked at me, his expression more serious. You know, he said, I don't know what happened in your past, but I can tell you've been through something. I tensed slightly. He wasn't wrong. But, he continued, I also see someone who's stronger because of it. I swallowed, caught off guard by his words. Emily, he said softly, whatever broke you before, it doesn't define you. And just like that, I realized something. James? Olivia? The betrayal? They were just a chapter, not my whole story. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in ages. You're right, I said. Then I clinked my glass against his. To new beginnings. Nathan smiled back. To new beginnings. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed in them. Life was good again. Or so I thought. Nathan and I had grown close over the past few months, and for the first time since James shattered my world, I felt like I could finally breathe. I was healing, moving forward, until he came back. It was a stormy evening when James showed up at my door. I had just finished cooking dinner when the loud knocking rattled my apartment. At first, I thought it was my neighbor, but as soon as I peered through the peephole, my stomach dropped. James. Soaking wet from the rain, his face pale, his eyes wild. I debated ignoring him, but something in his expression made me pause. I opened the door just an inch. What do you want? His breath hitched, and for the first time ever, he looked desperate. Emily, please, he rasped. I need to talk to you. It's important. I crossed my arms. We've already said everything that needed to be said. No. He shook his head violently. You don't understand. Olivia. A loud crack split through the air as thunder rumbled above us. James flinched. I rolled my eyes. What? She finally realized you were a garbage human? James stepped forward, lowering his voice. Emily. She's dead. The world tilted. I blinked. What? James ran a shaking hand through his wet hair. She was found in her apartment this morning. It was staged to look like an accident, but the police think it was something else. Murder. The word hung in the air between us, unspoken but heavy. My blood turned ice cold. James exhaled sharply. And that's not the worst part. He swallowed hard. Before she died, she left a voicemail. For you. My heart nearly stopped. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. James slowly pulled out his phone and pressed play. A distorted, static-filled voice crackled through the speaker. Then Olivia's frantic whisper, Emily. Oh God, I don't know who else to call. I think someone's following me. This isn't just about James anymore. I found something. Something bad. A loud crash sounded on the recording, followed by her sharp intake of breath. If anything happens to me, please don't trust... Silence. Then the recording cut off. I stumbled back, my pulse pounding in my ears. What the hell? I breathed. James clenched his jaw. She tried to tell you something before she died. And now, I think we're next. A sharp gust of wind slammed the door open wider, sending a chill down my spine. Somewhere in the darkness, I swore I saw a shadow move. Watching. Waiting. And then the power went out. Pitch black. Silence. A single realization gripped my mind. This wasn't over. Not even close. My parents stole my college fund. So I got revenge. I always believed that my parents had my back, that they wanted the best for me. Growing up in a small town, I had big dreams of escaping to a prestigious college, making a name for myself, and building a life beyond the narrow horizons of home. Every summer, I worked odd jobs, mowing lawns, babysitting, flipping burgers, saving every dollar in the name of my future. My parents promised that all this hard-earned money would go into my college fund. It was my senior year of high school when the truth punched me in the gut. The college acceptance letters began rolling in, and I was ecstatic, especially about the offer from my dream school. But excitement turned to dread when I sat down with my parents to discuss finances. Dad scratched his head and avoided my eyes. Mom sighed dramatically before delivering the news. Honey, there is no college fund. Confusion clouded my mind. What do you mean there's no fund? We needed it, Dad said, his voice laced with irritation. Your aunt needed help with her mortgage, and we had bills. They had spent it all, on family emergencies, on their whims, on everything but my future. Anger coursed through me, hot and unrelenting. Their betrayals were not just financial, but personal. They had stolen my dream, my hard work, and my trust. I stormed out of the house, mind racing with plans for revenge. If they had robbed me of my future, then I would take back control in my own way. The first step was to get a job, something decent that paid well and didn't require a degree just yet. I found work as a virtual assistant, leveraging my knack for organization and my understanding of social media. Nights were spent learning digital marketing, coding, and graphic design, skills that could translate into cold, hard cash. Months went by, and my side hustle began to bloom into a small business. I built websites for local businesses, managed social media for influencers, and even launched an online course teaching others how to start their own digital ventures. Every penny I made, I saved. I rented a tiny apartment in the next town over, just far enough to keep my parents out of my new life. The crowning moment came when I received an email offering a full scholarship for an online degree in business. It wasn't the traditional college experience I had dreamed of, but it was a new path, one I had paved for myself. Once I had the degree and a thriving business, I decided it was time for the final act of my revenge. I returned home one Sunday afternoon, finding my parents lounging in the living room. They barely recognized the polished, confident person I had become. I wanted to thank you, I started, keeping my voice steady. Because you stole from me, I learned how to fend for myself. Their faces contorted in confusion and embarrassment. I've started my own business, got my degree, and am now making more money than you both ever did. And I did it all without your help. I placed a check on the coffee table, enough to cover what they had stolen with interest. Consider this repayment for everything you took from me. We're even now. Without waiting for a reply, I walked out of their house, out of their lives, knowing I had reclaimed my future on my own terms. And the sweetest part? Living well truly was the best revenge. As I walked out of my childhood home, I felt lighter than ever before. The anger, the resentment, the disappointment, they no longer had a hold on me. I had made my statement, and my parents had to live with what they had done. But just when I thought my chapter with them was over, life had other plans. A few months passed, and my business flourished. I moved into a sleek downtown apartment, traveled, and met people who truly supported my ambitions. My parents tried to reach out a few times, mostly guilt-ridden texts or awkward attempts to call. But I ignored them. That is, until one day my mom left a voicemail that caught my attention. "Sweetheart, please call us. It's important. I almost deleted it, but curiosity got the better of me. I called back, expecting another excuse, another plea for forgiveness. Instead, I was met with something I never expected. "We're losing the house," my dad admitted, his voice hollow. Apparently, their financial irresponsibility hadn't stopped with my college fund. They had taken out loans they couldn't repay, maxed out credit cards, and were drowning in debt. Their home, the one they had stolen my future to keep afloat, was about to be taken from them. For a moment, I felt the old anger creeping back in. They had lied to me, stolen from me, and now they expected me to bail them out? "I'm sorry to hear that," I said coolly. "We were hoping you could help us," my mom whispered. I let the silence stretch. My success had given me power, the kind of power they had once used against me. I could save them. I had the money. But did they deserve it? "You taught me an important lesson," I finally said, "that I can't rely on anyone but myself." I could hear the desperation in their voices, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no guilt, just a sense of clarity. "I hope you figure it out," I added, then hung up. That was the last time I spoke to them. They lost the house a few months later. I heard from an old neighbor that they moved into a tiny rental across town. They had to start over, just like I did. But unlike them, I had built something lasting, something real. My revenge wasn't just in cutting them off. It was in proving that I never needed them to succeed. And the best part? I was finally free. Months passed and life kept getting better for me. My business was thriving. I had an amazing new group of friends, and I had plans to expand my company internationally. Every time I looked around at my new reality, I felt a deep sense of pride. I had built this life on my own, without my parents' so-called help. But despite my success, a part of me still kept an eye on them from a distance. Not because I cared, but because I wanted to see what happened to people who took advantage of others and thought they'd never face consequences. And their downfall? It was brutal. After losing the house, my parents had to move into a rundown apartment on the other side of town. My dad struggled to hold down a job, bouncing from one gig to another, while my mom started working at a local grocery store just to make ends meet. It was a far cry from the comfortable life they had stolen from me to maintain. Then, one day, out of the blue, I got another message from my mom. This time, it wasn't a plea for money. It was a confession. "We were wrong. We should have never taken your money. And now, we're paying for it. We're sorry." I read the message twice, trying to detect any hint of manipulation. But for the first time, it didn't sound like an excuse or a guilt trip. It sounded real. Did that change anything? Number. But it did make me realize something. I had already won. Revenge wasn't about making them suffer. It wasn't about ignoring them or proving I was better. It was about taking control of my own destiny, about never letting anyone, especially them, dictate my future. So I made one final decision. I responded with just 2 words. "I forgive you." Not for them, but for me. Because I refused to carry their mistakes any longer. And with that, I put my phone down, closed that chapter of my life for good, and walked into the future I had built with nothing but my own determination. The best revenge? It wasn't money. It wasn't even success. It was finally being free. After sending that message, I thought I was done with them. I had finally let go of the past, and I was ready to move on without any lingering resentment. But life has a funny way of testing you, just when you think you've closed the book on something. A few weeks later, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. It was my mother. She looked different. Thinner, tired, like the weight of her mistakes had finally caught up with her. She hesitated at the door, unsure if she should even be there. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She stepped inside cautiously. I wanted to see you," she said, fidgeting with the strap of her worn-out purse. "And to say thank you." I frowned. "For what?" "For not letting what we did destroy you." She swallowed hard. You could have turned bitter. You could have let it break you, but instead you became something we never imagined. I wasn't sure how to respond to that. She continued, Your father and I, we were selfish. We took from you, and we never thought about what it would do to your future. But now, I see that you didn't just survive. You thrived, and we fell apart. I studied her, looking for some hidden agenda. But there was nothing. Just regret. I'm not here to ask for anything. She added quickly, as if reading my mind. I just wanted to tell you that, and to let you know that I understand why you walked away. For the first time, I didn't feel anger toward her. I just felt pity. She turned to leave, but just before she walked out, I found myself speaking. Mom. She paused. I hope you figure things out. She gave me a sad smile and nodded before disappearing out the door. That was the last time I saw her in person. Years later, life moved on, and so did I. My business expanded globally, I traveled the world, and I eventually settled in a city far from where it all began. Every once in a while, I'd get an update about my parents through old family friends. My dad found steady work as a mechanic, and my mom started a small side business making handmade crafts. They never reached out again. Not for money, not for help, not even for a second chance. And honestly, I was okay with that. I had built a life that no longer revolved around them, their mistakes, or the revenge I once sought. I had won, not by destroying them, but by proving I never needed them to begin with. Because at the end of the day, true success isn't just about money or payback. It's about freedom. And I had finally, truly found mine. Years passed, and my life became everything I had once dreamed of. Independence, success, and a sense of peace I never thought possible. But just when I thought I had left my past behind for good, fate had one last twist in store. It started with a phone call. An unknown number popped up on my screen, and for some reason, I answered. Hello? A tired voice came through the line. Is this you? I knew that voice. It was my father's. My body tensed, old wounds threatening to reopen. What do you want? There was silence for a moment, then a heavy sigh. I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't important. I was seconds away from hanging up when he said something that made me stop. It's your mother. She's sick. I froze. What? She was diagnosed last year. It's bad. His voice cracked, the weight of reality sinking into every word. She asked for you. My chest tightened. It had been years since I had even thought about them beyond the occasional memory. I had moved on, built a life without them. But this was something else entirely. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Because she doesn't have much time. I exhaled slowly, my mind spinning. I had spent so long resenting them, proving I didn't need them. But deep down, a small part of me wondered, was I really okay with never seeing my mother again? I didn't give him an answer right away. Instead, I told him I'd think about it. And for the next few days, I did. Eventually, I made my decision. I wasn't doing it for my father. I wasn't even sure I was doing it for my mother. But I needed to see her, if only to find closure. When I arrived at their small apartment, the sight of it felt surreal. The last time I had been in their home, I was just a kid who had lost everything. Now I was someone entirely different. My father opened the door, his face etched with the lines of stress and regret. He stepped aside without a word, and I walked in. And there she was. My mother, once full of energy and confidence, now looked frail and tired. Her eyes lit up with something between relief and sorrow when she saw me. You came, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. I nodded, unsure of what to say. She reached for my hand, her grip weak but desperate. I know I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you being here. I swallowed hard. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't think I had the right to. her eyes filled with tears. Not after everything we did. I sat beside her, the years of pain and anger still lingering, but something else rising to the surface. Understanding. She made a mistake. A huge one. One that had hurt me deeply. But in that moment, none of it seemed to matter anymore. Because no amount of revenge could change the past. So instead of bringing up the old wounds, I did something I never thought I would. I held her hand. And for the first time in years, I let go of the anger. My mother passed away 3 weeks later. I didn't stay long after that. My father and I didn't magically repair our relationship, and I didn't suddenly forget what they had done. But I walked away knowing one thing. I had gotten my revenge. Not through anger, not through cutting them off, but by rising above what they had done. And in the end, I was finally free. Not just from them, but from the past. After my mother's funeral, I didn't stick around. I left the small town for the last time, knowing I had nothing left there. No unfinished business, no lingering attachments. I expected to feel relief, like a weight had been lifted. But instead, I just felt empty. Closure wasn't as satisfying as I thought it would be. I had spent years proving to myself that I didn't need my parents, that I was stronger without them. And I was. But now, with my mother gone, all that anger and resentment had nowhere to go. It just disappeared. What was left in its place? I wasn't sure yet. Months passed and life returned to normal, at least on the surface. My business was still thriving, my travels continued, and I remained the independent, successful person I had fought so hard to become. Then, one evening, my phone rang again. It was my father. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. "What?" I answered, my tone flat. There was a pause. Then he spoke, his voice rougher than before. "I just wanted to say, thank you." "For what?" "For being there. For her," he said. "I know we don't deserve anything from you. I know I don't." I stayed silent, waiting. I messed up. We both did. And I live with that every day. He sighed. "But I'm trying to be better. Not because I expect you to forgive me, but because it's the least I can do." Something in his voice felt real. He wasn't asking for anything. He wasn't making excuses. He was just telling me. I leaned back in my chair, processing his words. For years, I had thought revenge meant cutting them off completely, proving I could succeed without them. And maybe that was true for a while. But now, I had nothing left to fight against. "You don't have to keep calling me," I finally said. "I know," he replied. "But I will anyway. Just in case you ever want to talk." I didn't answer. I just ended the call. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger or resentment toward him. I didn't feel anything at all. I never responded to his next few calls. Not because I was angry, but because I had moved on. I had a life. A good life. One that wasn't tied to my past or the people who had hurt me. But one day, maybe years from now, maybe when I had a family of my own, maybe when enough time had passed, maybe I would call him back. Not for him. Not for revenge. But for me. Because in the end, my greatest success wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I had the power to write my own story. And this was just the beginning. The years passed like whispers in the wind, carrying me further and further away from the life I had once known. My business empire stretched across continents. My name was spoken in rooms I never imagined I'd enter. And my success became a force that no one, especially not my father, could deny. But despite everything, his calls never stopped. Once every few months, I'd see his number flash across my screen. Sometimes I'd let it ring. Sometimes I'd listen to the voicemails, his voice growing older, wearier. But I never answered. Until one night. I was in my penthouse overlooking the city skyline, a glass of whiskey in my hand when my phone vibrated. Dad. I stared at the screen, debating whether to ignore it like all the others. But something inside me, something unspoken, urged me to pick up. So I did. The moment I answered, I knew something was wrong. His breathing was ragged, his voice weak. "It's me," he murmured. "I don't have much time." My grip on the glass tightened. "What's going on?" A heavy silence. Then finally he spoke. "I'm in the hospital," he said. "Doctors say it's my heart. Not long now." For a moment I felt nothing, just an emptiness, like a void where emotions should be. "I needed to hear your voice one last time," he continued. "Even if you hate me, even if you never forgive me." I closed my eyes. The past flashed before me. The betrayal, the anger, the revenge. The years I spent building my life without him. The moment I walked away. And yet, here he was. Small. Weak. Dying. The man who once held power over me now had none at all. I exhaled slowly. "You stole from me," I said, my voice steady. "You took my future and spent it on yourself." "I know." His voice cracked. "And I would give anything to take it back." I let his words hang between us. The boy I once was would have savored this moment, would have relished in the idea of his suffering. But I wasn't that boy anymore. "I forgave you a long time ago," I said finally. "But that doesn't mean I want you in my life." A shaky breath came through the line. "I understand." There was nothing left to say. I heard him swallow, then whisper, "I'm proud of you, son." And just like that, the call ended. I stared at my phone for a long time, then set it down. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief. I just felt free. For the first time in my life, the past no longer held me prisoner. The revenge I once sought had already been fulfilled, not in his suffering, but in my triumph. And as I stood there, looking out at the empire I had built with my own hands, I realized something. I never needed to destroy him. I only needed to rise above him. And I had. I turned away from the window, leaving it all behind. And I never looked back. The news came 2 days later. My father was gone. I didn't attend the funeral. There was nothing left for me in that town. No ghosts worth chasing. No closure I hadn't already found. But despite everything, I couldn't ignore the quiet weight of his final words. "I'm proud of you, son." I told myself it didn't matter. That it was too little. Too late. That I had moved on. But some wounds never heal the way we expect them to. A week later, a lawyer contacted me. My father had left me something in his will. I nearly refused. What could he possibly have to give me now after all these years? But curiosity won. I arrived at the lawyer's office expecting some meaningless trinket, a last attempt at redemption. Instead, he handed me a single envelope, yellowed at the edges, my name scrawled across it in shaky handwriting. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a letter. "I know you probably won't read this, and if you do, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I took from you what I had no right to take. And for years I told myself it was for the family, for survival. But the truth? I was weak. And I was selfish. I thought if I could keep the house, the cars, the illusion of success, then I wouldn't have to face what I really was, a failure of a father. But in the end, I lost everything anyway. Except you. And losing you hurt the most. I watched from afar as you built your empire. I saw your name in magazines, your interviews on TV. And I knew. You had become more than I ever could have imagined. Not because of me, but in spite of me. I won't ask for your forgiveness, but I need you to know this. I never stopped loving you, even when I didn't deserve to. There's a safety deposit box in your name. Inside, you'll find what's left of my life. What little I could give back. It's not enough. It will never be enough. but maybe, just maybe, it's a start. Goodbye, son. Dad. I let out a slow breath, folding the letter carefully. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't ache. I wasn't sure what I expected to feel. Anger? Sadness? Relief? But all I felt was the same quiet emptiness that had followed me for years. Later that evening, I went to the bank and accessed the deposit box. Inside, I found a stack of documents. Old photos of us, my birth certificate, even my first report card. And at the very bottom, a check, $50,000. I let out a bitter chuckle. My college fund, in a way. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. But for the first time, I realized something. He had tried. Even in the end, in his own broken, useless way, he had tried. And that was all that was left of him. I deposited the check. Not because I needed it, but because it felt like closing the last door to my past. And then, I did something I never thought I would. I picked up my phone, stared at the empty screen, and for the first time in years, I whispered, "Goodbye, Dad." Then, without another thought, I turned off the lights, walked into the future I had built, and never looked back. My husband's ex wants him back. But it gets worse. When I married Jake, I knew he had a past, just like anyone else. But I never imagined his past would knock on our front door. Literally. It was a rainy Thursday evening when the doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of pasta, while Jake was in the living room, scrolling through his phone. He didn't move to answer it, so I wiped my hands and went to see who it was. The moment I opened the door, my stomach dropped. There she stood. Madison, Jake's ex-fiancée. The woman he had almost married before me. The one he had left after she cheated on him with his best friend. She looked different from the photos I had seen. Thinner, more desperate. Her red lipstick was slightly smudged and her wet hair clung to her face. "Is Jake home?" she asked, her voice trembling. I hesitated. "Yes, but..." Before I could finish, Jake appeared behind me. His entire body tensed. "Madison? What the hell are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," she pleaded. "Please." I crossed my arms. "You can say whatever you need to say right here." Madison's eyes flickered to me for a brief second before locking onto Jake again. "It's important." Jake sighed, then turned to me. "Babe, can you give us a second?" I didn't like it, but I wasn't about to start a fight on our doorstep. "Fine, but don't take too long." I stepped back inside, leaving the door slightly ajar so I could still hear. Madison's voice was frantic. "Jake, I made a mistake. Leaving you was the worst decision of my life. I've changed, I swear. I want you back." I expected Jake to shut her down immediately, but instead there was a pause. My heart pounded in my chest. Then, finally, he spoke. "Madison, you don't get to show up after all these years and say that. I'm married now. I love my wife." Relief flooded through me. But then Madison whispered something that made my blood run cold. "I know what you did." A long silence followed. "What are you talking about?" Jake's voice was low, cautious. Madison leaned in. "I know what you did the night before our wedding. I have proof." My grip on the door tightened. Jake exhaled sharply. "Madison, stop playing games." She laughed, but it was bitter. "You think I'm lying? I have messages, photos. If your wife knew..." I didn't let her finish. I pushed the door open and stepped outside. "If I knew what?" Both of them turned to look at me. Jake looked terrified. Madison smiled. "Ask him where he was the night before our wedding. Ask him who he was with." My pulse pounded in my ears. "Jake?" He shook his head. "It's not what you think." "Oh, but it is," Madison cut in. "He was with someone else. And guess what? It wasn't me." I felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling. "Jake, tell me she's lying." His silence said everything. Madison smirked. "I'll leave you two to talk." And with that, She turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. I looked at my husband, the man I trusted, the man I loved. "Jake," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Tell me the truth." And then he did, and it was worse than I ever could have imagined. The rain had started to fall harder, but I barely noticed. My entire body was numb, my breath shallow. Jake ran a hand through his hair, avoiding my gaze. "It's not what it sounds like, Anna." "Then explain it," I snapped. "Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you cheated on Madison the night before your wedding, with someone else." His jaw clenched. It wasn't cheating. We were already falling apart. I let out a bitter laugh. "So that makes it okay?" Jake exhaled sharply. "Fine. Yes, I slept with someone the night before I was supposed to marry Madison. But what?" My voice cracked. He swallowed hard. "It was with her sister." The world around me tilted. "What?" Jake finally met my eyes. "Madison's younger sister, Claire." I stumbled back, feeling as though someone had knocked the air from my lungs. I had met Claire before, at a party, in passing. She was sweet, quiet, the complete opposite of Madison. And now, suddenly, I couldn't unsee the resemblance. "You slept with your fiancé's sister the night before your wedding?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Jake took a step closer, but I recoiled. He froze, his hands tightening into fists at his sides. "Anna, it was a mistake, a huge, drunken mistake. I regretted it the second it happened." I wanted to scream. "And you never thought to tell me? You let me marry you without knowing?" I didn't think it mattered. I let out a hollow laugh. "It didn't matter." My voice rose with disbelief. "You betrayed Madison, you betrayed her family, and now she's holding it over you. And I'm just supposed to be okay with that?" Jake looked down. "I didn't want to lose you." Tears blurred my vision. "And what if Madison isn't bluffing? What if she really does have proof?" He shook his head. "Claire and I never spoke about it again. There were no messages, no pictures. I don't know what Madison thinks she has, but it's not real." A lump formed in my throat. "And if it is?" Jake hesitated. I turned away, wiping my face. "I need some air." "Anna, wait." But I was already walking. I sat in my car, staring at the dashboard, my mind racing. I had thought Jake was the one person in the world I could trust completely. Now, I didn't know what to believe. Then my phone buzzed. A message. From an unknown number. "I told you he wasn't who you thought he was." Attached was a blurry image. I clicked on it, my stomach twisting. It was a screenshot of a text conversation. A message from Jake, sent years ago. "I wish I had met you first, Claire." It was never supposed to be her. I clapped a hand over my mouth. The rain poured harder outside, but inside a storm was brewing that no one could stop. And I had no idea what to do next. "Would you like me to keep going? This could go in so many directions. Revenge, confrontation, or an even darker twist. Let me know what you're thinking." The message burned into my vision. "I wish I had met you first, Claire. It was never supposed to be her." I reread it, my hands trembling. The rain pounded against the windshield, the inside of the car feeling smaller by the second. This wasn't just a one-night mistake. This was something deeper, something that made my stomach twist in knots. I needed answers. Without thinking, I clicked on the unknown number and called. It rang twice before she picked up. "I told you he wasn't who you thought he was." Madison's voice was smooth, smug. "Where did you get that text?" I asked, gripping the steering wheel. She let out a low chuckle. "Claire sent it to me a long time ago. She was scared. She felt guilty, but she also felt something else." I swallowed hard. "What are you talking about?" Madison sighed. "You're smart, Anna. Put it together. Do you really think Claire never had feelings for him? That Jake never felt the same? One night, a mistake? No, honey, it was more than that. My head spun. You're lying. Madison's tone turned icy. Am I? I wanted to hang up, but my fingers were frozen. If this was real, why didn't you say anything before? Because I wanted him to suffer, she admitted. I wanted him to be haunted by what he did. But when I found out Claire left town right after your wedding, that she cut all contact, that's when I knew. Knew what? I whispered. That he was in love with her. A sharp pain shot through my chest. Number Jake loved me. He married me. But the way his face had gone pale when Madison showed up, the way he had hesitated before telling me the truth, the weight of reality crashed down on me. I'll send you everything, Madison continued, her voice gentler now. Because you deserve to know. And because Jake deserves to finally face what he's done. The call ended. A second later, my phone vibrated again. Dozens of screenshots, photos, even a voicemail. With shaking hands, I pressed play. Claire's voice came through, barely above a whisper. Jake, I can't do this anymore. You chose her, but you still text me. You still act like there's something between us. I love you, but I can't be your secret. Please don't call me again. My vision blurred. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a love he had never let go of. And I was just the woman he settled for. I don't remember driving home. My mind was a haze of betrayal and heartbreak. By the time I parked, Jake was already outside, standing under the porch light, waiting. His eyes were desperate, worried. Anna. I shoved the phone into his hands. Explain. He looked down at the screen, scrolling through the messages, his jaw tightening with every second. When he reached the voicemail, his face paled. I crossed my arms. Say something. He looked up, his eyes full of guilt. I never wanted you to find out like this. Then how was I supposed to find out? I snapped. When she showed up at our anniversary dinner? When she sent me a wedding gift signed with love? Claire? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration all over his face. Anna, I love you. Claire was... It was complicated. I took a step back, my voice trembling. Did you ever love me? Or was I just the safe choice? Jake reached for me, but I pulled away. Please, he whispered. I married you. I built a life with you. That means something. I shook my head. But it wasn't love, was it? He didn't answer. And in that silence, I knew the truth. Tears filled my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I deserve better. Jake's face crumpled. Anna, don't do this. But I was already walking inside, past the life we had built together, past the memories I had thought were real. Because the worst part of it all? I wasn't heartbroken that Jake had loved someone else. I was heartbroken that I had spent years thinking I was the love of his life, when all along I had only been a shadow of what he really wanted. I locked myself in the bedroom, my heart pounding against my ribs. Jake banged on the door. Anna, please, let's talk about this. Talk? What was there to talk about? That he had been in love with someone else for years? That I had been nothing but a safety net? I grabbed my suitcase from the closet, tossing in clothes with shaking hands. My mind was screaming at me to run. Just go. Leave him in his mess. But then, a thought struck me. What if this wasn't just about love? What if Jake was hiding something even worse? I froze. My gaze landed on his nightstand where his phone was charging. He never let me go through his phone. Not once in all our years together. I had never thought twice about it. I had trusted him. Now, I grabbed the phone. It was locked. But I knew his password. Hands trembling, I unlocked it and went straight to his messages. There she was. Claire. A thread of text from months ago. No recent ones, nothing damning. I scrolled faster, checking emails, his call log. Nothing. Then, just as I was about to give up, I saw something. A hidden folder in his photos. I clicked on it, and my stomach dropped. The first picture was of Claire, a selfie, smiling. Then another. Her standing in front of a house I didn't recognize. Then another. Her sleeping, a timestamp from last year. Then I saw the videos. With shaking hands, I pressed play. The first was nothing unusual, just Claire laughing at something off camera. But then came the next one. She was crying. "Jake, stop filming me. This isn't funny." His voice came through the speaker, calm, almost soothing. "You need to listen to me, Claire. We had something real. I know you still feel it." She shook her head. "I don't, not anymore." Jake's voice darkened. "Then why haven't you told Anna? If you're so over me, why haven't you told her everything?" Claire looked terrified. "Because you scare me, Jake." The video ended. My vision blurred. I sat down on the bed, struggling to breathe. Jake hadn't just had an affair. He had been obsessed with Claire, controlling her, and she had been afraid of him. A cold shiver ran through me. Madison's words echoed in my head. Claire cut off all contact. Or maybe she hadn't cut contact. Maybe she had disappeared. I barely heard the knocking on the door anymore. I was too busy staring at my husband's phone, at the undeniable proof that he was dangerous. I had to get out of here. But first, I had to know the truth. I clicked on Jake's recent location history, and there it was. An address, visited multiple times over the last few months. I copied it into my own phone, shoved my things into my bag, and opened the door. Jake looked at me, desperate. "Anna, please, just..." I pushed past him. "Don't follow me, Jake." I ran to my car, slamming the door shut just as he reached the driveway. I didn't know what I was driving toward, but I knew one thing for sure. If Claire had disappeared, Jake had something to do with it. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I sped down unfamiliar streets, following the address that Jake had visited so many times. I could hardly breathe, my thoughts a storm of anger and confusion. How had I missed all of this? How had I been so blind to the man I had married? The GPS led me into a quiet, secluded neighborhood at the edge of town. The houses here were larger, more isolated, as if the owners preferred their privacy. I turned onto a narrow street, and then I saw it. A large, dark house at the end of the cul-de-sac. It was eerie. There were no lights on, the windows dark. But I couldn't stop now. I parked a little ways down the street, my heart racing. The house looked abandoned, but the more I stared at it, the more it seemed like the kind of place you could hide a secret. Was this the place Claire had gone to? Had she been forced into silence by Jake? I grabbed my bag and walked toward the house, my steps heavy on the pavement. The gate creaked as I pushed it open, and I moved toward the front door, hesitating for just a moment. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I knocked. Still nothing. I tried the handle. Locked. I was about to give up when a faint sound reached my ears. Footsteps. The door creaked open just slightly. A man's face appeared in the crack, his expression cautious. "Yes?" I froze. He looked familiar. His features were sharp, his eyes dark, but there was something unsettling about him. I'm looking for Claire," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The man's face didn't change. He glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. "I don't know who you're talking about," he said coldly. I didn't back down. "I know Claire stayed here. I know Jake." The man's eyes flickered for a split second, but it was enough. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low. "Go home." I took a step forward, feeling the adrenaline flood my veins. "No. I need to know what's going on. Where is Claire? What did Jake do to her?" The man's jaw tightened, and before I could react, he slammed the door shut. I stood there for a moment, stunned. Then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of the lock turning. Without thinking, I yanked the door open. Inside was a dimly lit hallway, and the house felt wrong. The air was thick with something I couldn't put my finger on. Fear, maybe? Or the remnants of a lie that had been buried for too long. The man stepped out, blocking my way. "You shouldn't have done that." I didn't move. "Where is she?" I demanded. He gave me a cold smile. "You don't understand. This isn't your fight, sweetheart." "Where is Claire?" He stepped toward me, his eyes narrowing. "You're asking questions you don't want the answers to. You don't know what you're dealing with. I swallowed hard, my body tense, ready to run if necessary. I think I do. I know enough to know that Jake is hiding something, something dangerous. I'm not leaving until I get the truth. He stared at me for a long moment as if deciding whether to stop me. Then, to my surprise, he stepped aside. Fine. You want the truth? He gestured toward the stairs. Go upstairs. You'll find everything you need. I didn't hesitate. I rushed up the stairs, heart pounding in my chest. The house seemed to stretch on forever, the walls lined with old portraits and dusty furniture. The deeper I went into the house, the more I felt like I was trespassing in a world I didn't belong to. Finally, I reached a door at the end of a narrow hallway. It was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was sparse, but it was the walls that caught my attention. They were covered in photos. Hundreds of them. There were pictures of Jake, of Claire, of Madison, all taken from various angles, most of them candid, as if someone had been watching them for a long time. And then I saw it. A picture of Claire, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. In the background, Jake's shadow loomed. I stumbled backward. I couldn't breathe. Looking for this? I turned, and there he was. Jake, my husband. But he didn't look like the man I had married. His eyes were wild, his face twisted in something close to desperation. What the hell is this, Jake? I whispered, my voice breaking. He stepped into the room, blocking the door. You don't understand, Anna. I understand enough. No, you don't. His voice was harsh, his tone cold. Claire was never supposed to be part of this, but she kept getting in the way. I took a step back, my heart racing. In the way of what? Jake's lips curled into a bitter smile. In the way of us. I froze, the words hanging in the air like a weight. Us? Yes, Anna. You think I married you because I loved you? I married you because you were safe. I shook my head. No, that's not true. You love me. You... His eyes darkened. No. I married you because I had to. Because you were there and I couldn't have Claire. She was too unpredictable, too wild. I could barely comprehend his words. You're sick. Jake's smile faded. You should have stayed out of this, Anna. Now you're going to have to pay the price. Before I could react, he lunged toward me. Jake's figure blurred as he lunged forward, his hand reaching out. But before he could grab me, I darted to the side, my body reacting instinctively. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't let fear control me now. I had to get out of here. I bolted toward the door, but he was fast, faster than I expected. He grabbed my wrist, yanking me back with surprising strength. You should have stayed out of this, he growled, his grip tightening. Let go of me, I screamed, pulling against his hold. But just as I thought I might break free, a noise echoed through the house. A door opening, followed by hurried footsteps. The man I had seen earlier appeared in the hallway, his face pale and grim. Jake, stop! Jake froze, his grip loosening just slightly. What are you doing? The man asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jake didn't answer, but his face darkened. She shouldn't have come here. She wasn't supposed to know anything. The man stepped forward, eyes darting between me and Jake. I told you not to involve her. She's not part of this. I shook my head, trying to make sense of what was happening. Part of what? What are you two talking about? Jake's eyes flickered to the man, and for a moment the tension in the room was so thick it felt like the walls were closing in on me. I didn't have a choice, Jake muttered. She wouldn't stop looking. She was going to find out anyway. The man reached into his coat pocket, pulling out something small and shiny. It was a key. He walked over to the door of a closet at the far end of the room and unlocked it. I didn't understand. What was inside that closet? The man turned toward Jake. It's time to end this. Jake didn't speak, but his expression said everything. He was torn. The man walked past me, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The door to the closet creaked open, and I heard him shuffle something around. I took a step forward, my pulse racing. I needed to know what was in there. What was the secret? Then, without warning, the man slammed the door shut, locking it again. Come with me, he said quietly, motioning for me to follow. What is going on? I demanded. Where's Claire? Where is she? What's in that closet? The man didn't answer. Instead, he led me out of the room, down the hall, and back toward the stairs. He opened the front door, and the chill night air rushed inside. I don't know how you got involved in this, he said, but it's too late for you to turn back now. My heart pounded, my body on high alert. What do you mean, too late? He gave me a cold look. You've seen too much, and now you'll have to deal with the consequences. I opened my mouth to protest, but he was already backing away, moving quickly toward the shadows of the yard. I wanted to chase him, demand more answers, but something in his expression told me I would be risking more than I was ready to handle. Instead, I watched as the man disappeared into the darkness. And then the front door slammed shut. The house was silent. I stood frozen on the porch, the air around me cold and still. Behind me, the faintest sound, an odd scraping noise, drifted from inside the house. My eyes snapped back to the window above the door, where a faint light flickered from behind the blinds. I wasn't sure what I had just seen, but something in me knew. I wasn't the only one who had been watching. A shadow moved across the room inside, and then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the light flickered out. I couldn't breathe. I turned and ran to my car, my hands shaking as I slammed the door shut. I didn't know what I had uncovered. I didn't know what was in that closet or what secrets Jake and this man had been hiding. But one thing was certain. I wasn't safe. I drove away from the house, the sound of my tires on the gravel the only thing breaking the silence of the night. But as I glanced in the rearview mirror, I thought I saw something, or someone, standing at the window of the house, watching me leave. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because I knew I would never truly escape what I had found.